The vicious older sister failed to murder her younger sister and was about to be publicly executed by her brother. Yet at this very moment, the younger sister, the supposed victim, revealed a sly smile. "Sister, you are truly stupid beyond belief. Just obediently go to hell." It turned out that the younger sister, who appeared innocent and harmless on the surface, was rotten and venomous to the core. From the moment Arya and her mother stepped into this household, the younger sister, Miel, had already harbored murderous intent and begun plotting everything. She first bribed the maid by Arya's side, then ordered the maid to favor her and target Arya, leading her step by step into the abyss of crime. Right after that, Miel poisoned her stepmother to death, yet the vicious girl still felt that was not enough. So she falsely accused Arya of trying to murder her, and because of all the earlier groundwork, everyone chose to believe it. After revealing the truth, Miel began laughing maniacally. "How could you be so stupid?" Arya trembled all over after hearing this. She never imagined that her sister could be so cruel. After learning the truth, unwilling to die just like that, she prayed to God, "Please let me return to the past, just like that hourglass, and reverse everything once again." Perhaps God heard her plea, because she really was sent back 10 years into the past. After being reborn, she tightly gripped the fragments of the hourglass. "Merciful God, thank you for granting me the chance for revenge. I swear that I will make everyone who persecuted me suffer a fate worse than death." Very soon, Arya welcomed her first confrontation with her sister. Before her mother and father left the house, she voluntarily recited a poem to express her longing. Her father was very pleased after hearing it, and even said he would definitely bring her a gift when he came home. Seeing her sister steal the spotlight, Miel naturally refused to be outdone. So she proposed to recite the companion verse to that poem, not realizing she had already fallen into her sister's trap. After listening, Arya first applauded and praised her, then suddenly changed her tone and said, "Oh, my little sister, don't you know that this poem carries the curse of our household? It has always been a forbidden poem." The moment those words fell, the atmosphere in the room instantly dropped to freezing point. Back then, Arya had been severely scolded by Miel's brother for reciting this very poem. But now, seeing that the one who made the mistake was his own younger sister, he remained silent. He even comforted her, saying, "It's all right, you're still young. Just be more careful next time." Seeing this scene, Arya felt utterly disgusted, but watching her sister suffer a setback also gave her an indescribable sense of satisfaction. However, this was only the beginning. She intended to tear off her sister's hypocritical mask with her own hands. Just now, Arya wanted to change into another outfit to attend the banquet, but when she opened the wardrobe, she found that it was filled with flashy and gaudy clothes. There was not a single piece suitable enough to wear out. She sat on the sofa in distress and told the maid to throw all the clothes away. But the maid told her that if all the clothes were thrown away, she would have no way to go out, because noble women's clothing was divided into outdoor wear and home wear, and if she wanted to leave the house, she had to wear outdoor clothing. Just as Arya was in a dilemma, she suddenly thought that her sister's figure was about the same as hers, and immediately came up with a plan. She first told the maid to put the clothes back, then told her to wait outside. Immediately after that, she took out a box of matches and burned all the clothes. Such a huge commotion indeed drew the whole family over. Seeing that her plan had succeeded, Arya immediately put on a pitiful expression and said that she had wanted to go out, but now all her clothes had been burned. As she spoke, she looked at her mother, who instantly understood. Going out in home clothes really would be inappropriate. That meant the only option was to borrow clothes from someone, and in the next second, everyone's gaze fell on Miel. Taking advantage of the moment, Arya said in a falsely considerate tone, "Little sister, I really don't want to trouble you. If you're unwilling, it's actually fine." Now that things had reached this point, if Miel still refused to lend them, then the image she had worked so hard to maintain would be damaged. So in the end, she could only force a smile and agree. Unwillingly, she brought Arya to her wardrobe. The moment she arrived, Arya knew exactly what she wanted and found a gift box in the corner. Because according to the memories of her previous life, the dress inside that box had been given by the person Miel had a crush on, and she had never once been willing to wear it. Sure enough, when Miel saw Arya choose that dress, her face instantly darkened, like the bottom of a pot. But in order to preserve her image of tolerance and generosity, she could only say gently that Arya could borrow it. But seeing that scheming little green tea sister getting frustrated, all I want to say is, well done. In her previous life, she had been tormented to death by that fake, manipulative younger sister. Only after being reborn did she realize that using cunning against cunning to take revenge on her sister was simply satisfying beyond compare. And now, she even wanted to win over her sister's future husband. It turned out that on this day, her brother brought Oscar to the house as a guest, the very person her sister had a crush on. Then everyone ate together, but Arya was deliberately not invited. But Arya had long expected this, and weakly said, "If I come eat too, will I be disturbing you?" Seeing this, Oscar immediately expressed his apology, saying it was all his fault for forgetting the young lady, and then told the maid to prepare another serving. Just like that, Arya successfully took a seat at the dining table, and Miel was naturally furious. Not only that, during the meal that followed, Arya and Oscar got along extremely well in conversation. It was as if they had completely forgotten that anyone else was there, making Miel's expression uglier than ever. After the meal ended, Arya recalled the look on her sister's face and was so delighted she almost felt like flying. But that was still far from enough. She still had to find a chance to give away the handkerchief, because here, when a girl gives a boy a handkerchief, it is itself a way of confessing affection. Unable to think of a good method, Arya went to the garden to water the flowers and relax, only to notice that the flowers higher up had not yet been watered. So she climbed up a ladder, but while she was watering them, Oscar suddenly passed underneath, and the water drenched him all at once. Arya was immediately terrified, because if she offended him, her plan would very likely fail. However, Oscar did not blame her. He only said that he was fine and told her not to come over, or else her own clothes would get wet too. Arya had not expected Oscar to be so gentle, so she seized the chance to take out that handkerchief. "I was too careless just now. Use this to wipe your clothes first." Of course, Oscar knew what it meant to accept that handkerchief, but under those circumstances, he had no way to refuse. In the end, he could only accept it, and through that unexpected incident, the two came to understand each other better. Soon it was time for dinner, and Cain and Miel returned from going out. They had prepared a gift for Oscar, but Arya had not expected it to be 3 pen nibs. Oscar let out a sigh, clearly not interested in such a gift. Still, he thanked them out of politeness. Arya observed the reactions of the 3 of them and had originally wanted to use the matter of the handkerchief to stir things up, but in the end she held herself back. Instead, she put on a pitiful expression, and Oscar immediately noticed her. He quickly asked her with concern what was wrong. Seeing this, Miel's face turned green with anger. Even the fork in her hand dropped to the floor. The next day, Oscar and Cain returned to the academy. After hearing the news, Arya's mother hurried back from a neighboring country. Unfortunately, Oscar had already left, so she looked somewhat disappointed. But fortunately, Arya had already seized the opportunity and firmly captured Oscar's heart. Not long afterward, the family received a return gift from him. Amid everyone's discussion, the butler announced that there was another gift, one specially for Miss Arya. Miel was utterly stunned by everything happening before her eyes. Arya then immediately twisted the knife. "Perhaps it is because he accepted my handkerchief." Miel was embarrassed to the extreme and wanted to rely on the letter to salvage a little dignity. But Arya slickly declined and refused no matter what to read the contents of the letter aloud. So she looked forward to Miel's maid Emma opening her own gift. What appeared before everyone at this moment was a set of clothes. But Arya did not seem to care about it at all. She merely took the hairpin inside and then hurriedly left, quickly arriving at the tea party. She then presented the embroidery she had sewn for the noble young ladies, drawing a wave of praise from everyone. After the superficial pleasantries, the tea party also came to an end. Just as Arya got into the carriage and was preparing to leave, she suddenly noticed an unfamiliar coachman. So she immediately sent someone to investigate his identity, only to discover that he was actually the old coachman from the estate. Now that he was already close to retirement, Arya was immediately filled with anger and questioned, "Why was this not reported to me in advance? If I had simply gotten into the carriage like that?" Arya forcibly swallowed the rest of her words. She knew that if she had really gotten into the carriage just now, she probably would have lost her life this time. It seemed Miel had deliberately planted someone by her side. For someone so young to have such scheming, she truly was worthy of being called a villainess. Thus, the grand feast of revenge officially began. Arya looked at the coachman before her, her heart constantly on guard. Having experienced being poisoned by her younger sister Miel, she had to tread carefully every step of the way. She told the coachman to return alone first, and upon hearing the strange noise coming from the carriage, she immediately concluded that something was wrong with it. There was no need to think about it. This had to be Miel's doing, so she immediately ordered a servant to find a new carriage. The servant left while grumbling. Arya came from a low background, and yet everyone around her was useless. That she could not obtain sufficient protection was only to be expected. Afterward, she entered the jewelry shop together with Jesse. Seeing Arya's graceful and proper demeanor, the shop owner immediately realized that she was no ordinary person. He hurriedly had someone bring out the finest goods in the store. Arya weighed 2 brooches in her hand, unable to decide for a long time. Because this was to be a gift for Oscar, all that mattered was that he feel it was valuable enough. As for the price, naturally the more expensive the better. In the end, she chose the bluish-green brooch. Arya then asked the owner to custom make several small brooches and casually drew the design on paper. The owner was instantly a little surprised, because what she had drawn was clearly the crest of the Rost family. But the Arya before him was completely different from the rumors, not only having excellent taste, but also carrying herself with ease and elegance. In order to keep this customer, the owner directly gave Arya a sapphire necklace as a gift. Seeing such a tactful shop owner, Arya's mood immediately improved. She even told him that she would definitely come often in the future. But the carriage still had not been found, so Arya decided to drink tea while waiting. The remaining servant looked idle off to the side and was directly sent away by Arya to continue searching for the carriage. Even now, her emotions still had not calmed down, since what had happened earlier had caused her quite a shock. Arya opened the window, wanting to get some air. Looking at the poor people coming and going on the street, Arya could not help but feel emotional. She had finally managed to squeeze her way into aristocratic life, so she absolutely had to secure her footing. She could never again allow Miel to push her into the abyss. She had to make the Rost family pay the price. Just at that moment, a familiar figure entered her sight. Arya focused her eyes and realized that it was actually that rude country nobleman from last time. At that moment, the man's blue pupils met hers, and then he curled his lips into a wicked smile. Arya's face instantly flushed red, and her heartbeat fell out of rhythm. She quickly drew the curtain and panicked, not knowing what to do, because she could never see through what exactly this man wanted. He was clearly a gloomy and cold person, so why would he smile at her? Why would he smile at her? A sense of unease instantly swept through her whole body. She no longer even had an appetite for the tea and snacks Jesse brought over. At this moment, all she wanted was to leave this troublesome place as soon as possible. Arya forced herself not to think about this man any further. After all, her goal was revenge, and she absolutely could not allow unnecessary distractions to arise. At the very moment Arya stepped onto the carriage, a bouquet of flowers was knocked to the ground, and just as she was feeling surprised, that man bent down and picked up the flowers. The two people bound by fate met once again. Holding the flowers, the man sincerely thanked Arya. Thanks to her earlier warning, he had been able to protect an important treasure. Arya felt a little disdainful inside, so he was merely a down and out noble. But the aggressive aura about him was impossible to ignore, and the sudden change in his attitude was simply too abrupt. Arya revealed a cold expression, but under the watchful eyes of the crowd, she could not directly refuse him. The man then knelt on one knee and held the flowers out before her. Arya originally wanted to press this man about his identity, but in the end, all she got was a name. Afterward, she casually had a servant smell the bouquet, and only after confirming that there was nothing unusual did she feel slightly reassured. Just as Arya was about to leave, Az proposed saying goodbye with a hand kiss and, at the same time, apologizing for what had happened before. Without even thinking, Arya directly refused. As she got into the carriage, she even deliberately threw the flowers onto the ground and stepped on them a few times. Looking at the bouquet she had trampled, Arya deliberately put on a heartbroken expression. Az was obviously stunned for a moment, but then he unexpectedly burst into laughter. Arya had originally wanted to see an embarrassed expression on Az's face, but seeing that this was his reaction, she instead felt a little disappointed. At the same time, however, the doubts in her heart deepened. She became more and more curious about Az's identity. At dusk, Arya returned to the mansion by carriage. Unexpectedly, that earlier coachman had gotten food poisoning. She knew very well that this was absolutely not an accident. Miel must have ordered someone to do it. John then said that the parts of the earlier carriage had also been tampered with, and that if anyone had really ridden in it, something definitely would have happened. Arya casually praised him a few times, then dismissed him with a reward. It seemed that her decision to take Oscar away was the correct one. Only in this way could she drive Miel completely mad. Step by step, she would guide her onto the path of a villainess and make her true nature fully exposed. But for now, Miel simply had too many accomplices. Nearly the entire estate was filled with her own people. Arya decided to use her mother's hand to remove these hidden dangers, so she told her everything that had just happened exactly as it was. Her mother flew into a rage after hearing it. She immediately gathered everyone and prepared to severely punish the coachman. Amid the commotion, the coachman had no way to defend himself. Arya also fanned the flames from the side, shifting the blame toward the butler, because all the servants in the mansion were under his command. The butler immediately and respectfully admitted fault, saying this was his negligence. As the manager among the servants, he naturally carried an unusual authority. Arya realized that she could not get rid of the butler. Instead, she should win him over, so she immediately found an excuse to help him out. She suspected that someone had deliberately acted behind the butler's back, so Arya turned her gaze toward Miel. At this moment, Miel was terrified, never expecting her plan to have failed. Arya pressed the advantage and even intended to call in the guard. Afraid that the matter would implicate her, Miel hurriedly argued that even if something had happened to Arya, it would not necessarily have killed her. Arya immediately seized upon the loophole in those words. How would you know what kind of accident would happen? Could it be that all this has something to do with you? This woman had returned to the past using the hourglass. She was going to make the younger sister, who framed her, pay the most painful price. And what she needed to do now was force her younger sister Miel step by step to admit her crime. Miel immediately began stammering. The maid Emma at her side saw that things were going badly and immediately leaned in to whisper a plan into Miel's ear. After hearing it, Miel suddenly had an idea. She cleverly resolved the crisis with her words. while Arya in turn revealed a sorrowful expression. If something really had happened, she would not still be standing here now. Then she changed her tone and said that if her younger sister had ridden in that carriage, even if nothing had ultimately happened, she herself would not have been able to eat or sleep in peace. Then she embraced her mother and put on a weak and pitiful appearance. Miel was still shaken with lingering fear. After this series of exchanges, she already understood that her sister had completely changed. She was no longer the foolish, naive girl she used to be, and Arya herself understood this very clearly. If she did not abandon this loyal subordinate now, then the image Miel had worked so hard to maintain would completely collapse before everyone, and from then on no one would ever believe her again. With no other choice, Miel could only nod in agreement, and only then did this disturbance temporarily come to an end. At mealtime, Arya sat alone at the dining table. Miel was so furious that she hid in her room and refused to come out, only pretending that she did not feel well. This was simply the most enjoyable meal Arya had ever had. While she was eating, the butler came to report that the people from the jewelry shop had already delivered the gift to the door. His attitude toward Arya had already quietly changed, and he was gradually beginning to favor her. Just as her mother was about to announce the result of the punishment, Arya quickly stood up to inspect the goods. Looking at the exquisite brooch, its quality had even far exceeded her expectations. Then her mother gathered the servants and announced the final punishment. Thus, the coachman who had abandoned his post without permission was demoted, and the coachman who had rashly taken his place was also dismissed. Miel felt dizzy for a moment and hurriedly pretended to feel unwell. Drawing concern from everyone around her, she had thought she could use the opportunity to leave, but unexpectedly, Arya stopped her, then had Jessie bring over that sapphire necklace. Amid the crowd's exclamations, the necklace was given to Miel. The maid Annie at the side was secretly astonished by this scene, never expecting Miss Arya to be so generous. Looking at Miel's embarrassed expression, Arya personally placed the necklace around her younger sister's neck. Annie was filled with envy, while their mother looked at this seemingly harmonious scene. After saying a few words of instruction, she turned and left. Arya then returned to her room and leisurely enjoyed her afternoon tea. How she wished that coachman, having lost his backer, would simply cut off Miel's head. Then she thought again of Emma, the maid by Miel's side, who was always constantly giving her ideas. If that was really the case, then Emma absolutely could not have been unrelated to Arya's death in her previous life. So she planned to use Annie to investigate Emma. But right now, there was still one even more important matter, and that was to write a letter to Oscar. She immediately had Jessie send out the stationery and the gift. As for herself, she casually turned the hourglass over. The next second, Jessie suddenly appeared before her again and repeated what he had just said. Arya looked at him, shock written across her face. With just an absent-minded flip of the hourglass, the maid who had just gone out to deliver the letter had actually reappeared before her once more. Looking at Jessie before her, Arya's heart was full of astonishment because this conversation had happened just a few minutes earlier. Moreover, the pen she had set down and the letter she had sent out had both returned intact to her hand. Arya even suspected that she was hallucinating because in her memory, Jessie had clearly already taken the letter away. When she looked at the desktop again, she discovered that the amount of stationery was exactly the same as when it had first been brought over. In other words, she had not even begun writing the letter at all. Arya was stunned for a moment, but before she could think further, she drowsily pulled the covers over her head and fell asleep. At noon the next day, Jessie brought her some juice. Arya had not expected that she would sleep for so long in one go, so she glanced at the hourglass. Then she casually turned it over, and the miraculous scene happened again. Jessie suddenly appeared behind her, and the juice she had already finished somehow returned full and brimming to the side. A flash of realization struck Arya's mind, and a crazy idea was born. Perhaps her return to the past was connected to this. She recalled those subtle actions from before. Arya instantly understood that it was the hourglass before her that had taken her back a few minutes, so she smiled enchantingly. After trying again and again, she finally mastered the method of activating the hourglass, but it could only be turned once per day, and it could only return her to 5 minutes earlier. Still, that was enough for her to have some fun with it, such as venting all her dissatisfaction toward her tutor, then mocking her son as well. Afterward, she would turn the hourglass and let time flow backward. Then she would offer the tutor false praise instead, though the side effect was that it placed a huge burden on the body. But Arya did not care about that at all. After all, revenge was the highest priority, and so she embarked on a path of courting disaster, beginning to toy with Miel by splashing water on her head and deliberately tripping her. Miel's cries for help rang out again and again throughout the mansion. In any case, she could use the hourglass to remedy things afterward, which added a bit of amusement to her boring life. But Oscar never responded. A full 2 weeks passed, and still there was no news from him. Arya remembered what the attendant had said at the time. Although Oscar had accepted the gift, he had left no message, perhaps because final exams were approaching and he needed to prepare for them. Considering how hard the attendant had worked running about for her, Arya casually offered a few words of concern, since the most important thing was that the gift had been accepted. Although the contents of the letter might make him reject her, first accumulating some connection was not a bad approach. Arya grew somewhat restless, and even once thought of using the hourglass to win him over. And amid that anxiety, Oscar's reply finally came. Arya carefully read the letter. It clearly drew a boundary, showing that he did not want too much entanglement with her. How could that be acceptable? Arya immediately called Jessie over. She quickly wrote a reply. Seeing how happy she looked, Jessie felt a faint sense of foreboding in her heart. The dessert she had finished just a moment earlier could be restored to its original state with a single turn of the hourglass. Arya shared them with the servants to taste. That way, not only could she fill her own stomach, she could also win the servants' hearts. Jessie was deeply moved. Next, she took out the books Arya had asked her to buy. Basic Economics. This was an introductory economics book convenient for children to read. Arya planned to study all kinds of knowledge and make herself truly learned. After all, under the old aristocratic social system, women were unable to enter academies to attend classes. Arya could only rely on self-study to improve herself, and this knowledge would certainly be useful in the future. If she wanted her father, who was a count, to believe her, then mastering a certain amount of knowledge was absolutely necessary. Arya was thinking about her future, planning to carve out a career for herself through this, and studying hard for the sake of her own wealth. But Jessie suddenly popped up. She was somewhat baffled by Arya's requirements for this year's birthday party. After all, the scale of Arya's parties in previous years had always been unprecedentedly grand. Yet this time she was inviting no one, only having tea with a few familiar noble ladies. Arya knew very well that Miel's birthday was also coming soon, and if a stark contrast were formed with hers, people would definitely gossip. At this moment, keeping a low profile was the wisest course. Teacher Sarah came to visit. Arya happily went forward to greet her, and seeing this warm scene, the maids could not help but smile as well. She knew very well that Sarah would become her staunchest supporter. And this time Sarah had come to ask what kind of birthday gift Arya liked, but Arya only wanted a handkerchief. As soon as Sarah heard this, she became interested and immediately took out a whole box full of them. But the handkerchief Arya wanted was one made by Sarah herself, and she also wanted each of them to have one, just like sisters. Teacher Sarah was deeply moved. She stepped forward and tightly held Arya's hand, saying that she would definitely put all her heart into weaving it well. Arya was somewhat speechless, because she knew what would happen next. Sarah would meet the Marquis in high society. By then, the two of them would fall in love, and she would have no time at all to care about things like friendship. But Sarah had no interest whatsoever in social circles, and her mother's expression gradually dimmed as well. Seeing this, Arya changed the subject and asked what the first thing she most wanted to do after becoming an adult was. Sarah's answer was unexpected. She had actually chosen to become a teacher because of Arya. Being able to accompany a child as she grows up was the luckiest thing in Sarah's life. Arya was a little surprised, not expecting that Sarah truly liked her. Such a development was simply wonderful. When Sarah became the Marchioness later, Arya would stand by her side, and at that time, she would surely shine brilliantly and be impossible to ignore. Today was Arya's birthday. The noble ladies all presented their gifts one after another, but Arya could not feel happy at all because the nobleman Oscar had not attended, even though she had clearly invited him in a letter. The young ladies then urged Arya to open the gifts. Looking at the rough workmanship, she still forced a smile, while inwardly thinking of passing them on to Jessie. Sarah also handed over her gift, and when Arya opened it, beside a handkerchief, there was also a pair of exquisite gloves. Sarah took out a matching pair, happily showing them off to everyone. Arya was stunned and could not speak for a long time. This handkerchief embodied Sarah's feelings, and it was the best gift she had received so far. Everyone lavished praise on Arya's clothes. After all, the fur used was special, and at a glance, it was obviously very valuable. Arya said with a smile that it was given to her by her father, the Count. Then she began twisting the knife, claiming that her favorite gift was the teddy bear her father had given her. Amid everyone's curiosity, Arya quickly brought out the teddy bear. It was covered all over with diamonds. The young ladies immediately revealed horrified expressions. Only Sarah innocently thought the teddy bear was truly adorable. Jessie brought in the tea and refreshments. Just as the birthday banquet was about to begin, Miel barged in and, in front of everyone, questioned why she had not been invited to the birthday party. Arya hurriedly explained, saying that she had invited her and merely used Miel's poor health as the reason, thereby preserving her own position. Miel smiled contemptuously and had Emma hand her a bouquet of flowers. Then she swaggered away amid false and insincere birthday wishes. Only Arya was left standing there blankly. As the older sister, not inviting her younger sister to a gathering was the kind of thing people would definitely talk about, and she began to panic. The hourglass was still upstairs. She did not know whether, if she ran back to get it now, there would still be time. Arya suddenly came to her senses. There was no need to make a fuss over such a small matter. So she portrayed Miel as a fragile girl, and between the lines revealed her dissatisfaction with the current state of the family. After all, it was she and her mother who had inserted themselves into it. And perhaps Miel still could not accept this reconstituted family even now, which was why she was placing the blame on her. This made Sarah unable to resist comforting her. Everyone was immediately led off in that direction and began expressing concern for Arya. Miel had finally managed to embarrass her sister for once, yet Arya cleverly resolved it. The banquet ended happily, and teacher Sarah also got into a carriage and returned home. Arya stayed alone in her room. She burned the flowers Miel had given her into ashes. It seemed she had to keep the hourglass with her at all times, just in case. Just then, Jessie hurriedly pushed the door open and came in. Oscar had arrived. While Arya was changing clothes, Miel took advantage of the opening. What would she say to Oscar? Taking advantage of the moment when her sister was changing clothes, her younger sister, Miel, moved first and started chatting with the nobleman Oscar. She noticed that Oscar had actually been growing thinner by the day, so the topic gradually shifted to Arya. Obviously, Oscar still did not know that today was her birthday and had only brought a bouquet of pure white flowers as a gift. Miel put on a pitiful expression and claimed that Arya had not invited her to the banquet. She said she had merely gone downstairs to deliver a gift and then returned to her room. Immediately afterward, she asked Oscar to attend her own birthday banquet. Looking at Miel's happy expression, no matter how unwilling he was inside, he still ultimately agreed. Arya hid behind the door and eavesdropped, but did not hear the entire conversation. When Miel saw her push the door open and come in, she hurriedly stood up and gave the stage back to her sister. Then, wearing an intimate smile, she brushed past her. Arya felt somewhat regretful that she had let someone seize the opportunity at a time like this. She also had no idea what exactly they had talked about, but she still pretended to be calm and exchanged pleasantries with Oscar. Arya showed off the hair accessory he had sent. It completely captivated Oscar. Then she asked in return why he was not wearing the brooch she had given him, and just as Oscar was about to speak, Arya directly took over the conversation, falsely claiming that it was the first gift she had ever prepared for someone, and that she hoped Oscar would not reject her feelings. This man softened once again. Originally, he had wanted to return the brooch, but by a strange twist of fate, Arya personally put it on him, and things developed into the current result. It was hard to say whether this was good or bad, but one thing was certain. Oscar's heart had already begun to waver. He gave this bouquet of flowers to Arya as a gift. But how could the cunning Arya possibly stop there? She pleaded with Oscar to become her pen pal, since she was lonely and almost had no friends. Oscar knew he had to refuse, because if such a thing got out, it would definitely invite gossip. But looking at Arya's pitiful appearance, Oscar could only agree helplessly in the end. Arya was overjoyed, and the delight on her face could not be hidden at all. Oscar still held onto a trace of wishful thinking that writing a letter once in a while should not be a big deal. After all, Arya is so pitiful, I can't just ignore her. This meeting thus ended pleasantly. Early the next morning, Arya woke up drowsily, thinking about how she had skillfully used the hourglass yesterday. Otherwise, she would already have been rejected by Oscar. She was considering having a watch custom made to remind her of the hourglass's time limit. At this moment, Jessie pushed the door open and came in, asking with concern about Arya's physical condition. After all, Arya had previously, intentionally or unintentionally, said things related to life and death. Looking at stubborn Jessie, Arya felt that this loyal servant ought to be rewarded. So she directly pinned Jessie against the wall. The servant was actually wall-pinned by Arya. Servant Jessie looked at her, momentarily somewhat at a loss. After all, the former Arya had always beaten and scolded her. Arya also realized this. She hurriedly admitted her own mistakes. As she spoke, she pinned a golden brooch onto Jessie's chest. This was both an apology and reflection for the past, and also meant to let the other maids see that Arya was a generous and wealthy person, and that she was also very kind to those beneath her. Afterward, she sent Jessie to the jeweler to custom make a pocket watch that would reset every 5 minutes. After Jessie accepted the order and quickly drove off in the carriage, watching her receding figure, Arya discovered that a carriage had actually arrived downstairs. It was teacher Sarah. She hurriedly changed her clothes and went downstairs to welcome her. According to how things were about to develop, Miel should send a maid over to meddle. To deal with this move, Arya decided to first pick someone who would be easy to win over. So she casually chose a short-haired maid to serve her tea. Just as Arya was planning to keep her, she prepared to leave on the grounds that Miel had business with her. An idea suddenly came to Arya, and she asked her about Annie's situation. When she learned that Annie was the youngest maid, she instructed the short-haired maid to bring the hourglass from the display cabinet. Time turned back to 5 minutes earlier. After hearing the short-haired maid say that she had no time to attend to her, Arya directly designated Annie as her temporary maid. And so this little freckle-faced maid was called over. She watched Arya and Sarah dance gracefully. She could not help but be moved, and before she knew it, She was staring in fascination. Just then, Jessie pushed the door open and returned, and Arya saw her covered in sweat. She hurriedly handed her a glass of water, and amid Arya's concerned voice, Jessie drank it all in one gulp. Of course, this was only for show. The purpose was to let Annie see the scene, and then Arya had her withdraw. Taking advantage of the intermission, Jessie hurriedly apologized to Arya, since she had been somewhat disrespectful just now, but the goal had already been achieved. As expected, Annie could not stop thinking about what had just happened. The news quickly reached Miel's ears, and when she learned that her sister lacked maids, she actually took the initiative to offer up one of her own maids to take care of Arya. On the surface, it looked like sisterly affection, but in reality, she was sending someone to secretly monitor her, to observe every move between Oscar and Arya. Unexpectedly, this move was exactly what Arya wanted. So she directly appointed Annie as her second maid. Arya had originally only wanted her to do some odd jobs. She also knew very well that Miel would have her spy on her. But she had not expected Annie to be so foolish that she would stare straight at her. Arya felt a little awkward and could only find something for her to do, seeing how efficiently Annie worked. Then she smelled a strong scent coming from Annie. In an instant, she found a breakthrough point. So she lifted Annie's face. A noble young lady was actually personally doing a maid's makeup. She was paving the way in advance for her revenge plan, and the maid Annie was one of the chess pieces in her hand. Looking at her renewed self in the mirror, Annie was somewhat surprised, never expecting that after makeup, she could become so attractive. This caused her originally firm heart to begin to waver as well. Judging by the scent on her body, Arya concluded that this maid had been secretly using Miel's cosmetics all along, so she smoothly turned the situation to her own advantage. She gave all of her own cosmetics to Annie, and casually also gave Annie a ribbon. Then she said that as long as Annie produced results, not only could she receive a gold medal like Jessie's, but she could also obtain better treatment. Annie's eyes widened from what she heard. Then Arya abruptly changed the subject and began practicing tea party etiquette with Annie. A maid raised in a noble mansion like this would always feel that one day she too could become a noble. Although the practice in front of her maid Annie somewhat embarrassed, in her heart, however, she was already overjoyed. Arya knew very well that this little maid was a person full of material desire and also shrewd and vicious. Then she would give her a chance to turn from a crow into a phoenix, but on one condition: she had to be useful to her. And Arya was the one who could lead her toward noble status, and the meaning was also very clear. Annie had to choose a side. Unexpectedly, Annie began hesitating and stammering. It seemed that compared with the benefits Arya offered, Miel's intimidation made her even more afraid to agree easily. This was also within expectations. After sending her away, Arya quietly lay down on the bed. She knew that with the current situation, no matter what, she still could not defeat Miel. The only thing she could do now was wait for the right opportunity. Some more time passed, and Arya looked at the bustling crowd downstairs. Her heart felt numb. Today was Miel's birthday. They had all come to deliver gifts, cart after cart of presents, precisely the symbol of noble vanity. But Arya had no mind to care about any of it. The only thing she cared about was that Oscar, who had become her pen pal, had still not replied. Just when Arya was feeling upset and distracted, another carriage stopped downstairs. She had thought it would be Oscar. Unexpectedly, the person who came was her father, who had been away all year round. He had actually rushed back specially to celebrate Miel's birthday. Arya could not help recalling the scene of her and her mother's tragic deaths. She had to turn such a warm scene into the beautiful dream that would come after her great revenge was fulfilled. Arya's target was not only Miel, but the entire Ross family. Just as she was planning to use the hourglass to stir something up at the birthday party, someone named Len appeared. Seeing this new character enter the stage, Arya immediately became uneasy. Had she once again, without knowing it, pushed something forward? This woman possessed noble blood. Every birthday, she would receive all kinds of expensive gifts. Yet beneath that pure appearance, there was a wicked heart hidden. Looking at the gift Len had sent, Arya was momentarily speechless. She did not know who his master really was. On a first visit, he had actually sent such an expensive accessory. Watching the intimate interaction between the two, Arya was almost on the verge of collapse. Could Miel's charm really be that great? The variables brought about by using the hourglass were indeed impossible to avoid. That's right, today was Miel's birthday, and she was wearing a dress that Oscar had given her. Coincidentally, Arya had also once received the same style. Out of courtesy, Arya still greeted her father. This action also drew Len's attention. He praised Arya's beauty, then he turned his head again and continued speaking with Miel. For a moment, Arya did not know how to react. This was the first time she had been defeated in terms of appearance, but in the end she still let it go. She realized that this person was nothing more than scum currying favor with the Count. Just as she was about to turn and leave, unexpectedly her father stopped her and took out an exquisite jewelry box. It should be known that before this, only Miel had been worthy of receiving such a gift. It seemed her efforts had indeed taken effect, so what she had to do next was make Miel look bad. Arya immediately changed into another outfit. Then she appeared within Miel's line of sight. Seeing the ill-intentioned look on her sister's face, Miel felt a chill in her heart and quickly sensed that something was wrong. Arya was actually wearing the same dress as her, and Miel's expression instantly became extremely ugly. The guests immediately began whispering among themselves. Miel, who had just been showing off her dress, was now embarrassed to the extreme. But obviously, faced with the rumored image of Arya as a villainess, everyone was more inclined to sneer, wanting to take the opportunity to mock her vulgar behavior. Yet the current Arya was flawless, whether in appearance, bearing, or etiquette and poise. She far surpassed all of them. This also made everyone present begin to doubt the truth of those rumors. Just as Arya was secretly feeling pleased with herself, Miel was suddenly called out to with a face full of delight. It turned out to be her brother Cain. What a false alarm. But immediately afterward, Oscar actually appeared beside Cain. Arya was utterly shocked. In her memory, Oscar had never attended Miel's birthday banquet. Why, then, had he not even replied to a single letter from her? Could it be that her own interference had caused things to develop in an unexpected direction? And what was going on with Cain? He was even staring at me lecherously. Even Oscar's face had turned red. Experienced in matters of love, Arya instantly understood everything. These two men had actually both developed feelings for her, and Oscar clearly could not suppress the guilt in his heart, which was why he had come to attend Miel's birthday. Arya hurriedly stepped forward and brought both of them back from their daze. Then she put on an injured expression and said that she should not interfere in the relationship between the two of them. After saying that, she turned and ran upstairs. This move was indeed effective. Under Miel's disdainful gaze, Oscar still chased after her upstairs. Arya had already been waiting for quite some time and had even changed the tea 3 times. At last, she had waited for Oscar to come. Looking at his flushed face, an indescribable sense of pleasure surged in Arya's heart. She knew very well that with only a light push more, she could completely win Oscar's heart. Oscar himself was also very confused. Clearly, there was already someone in his heart, yet he still could not stop thinking about the Arya before him. Taking advantage of this rare opportunity, the two of them began to talk, and it was as if Arya was taking the chance to confide in him. She frankly said that she did not have a single friend, and that she was the least good at handling occasions like this party. Oscar fell step by step into the trap, even showing dissatisfaction with Miel, as if saying that because of her, he could not properly talk with Arya. Yet, he was clearly just a pen pal, and although he had originally planned to go home early, he still ended up staying for dinner because Arya kept him there. Arya saw Oscar's inner struggle perfectly clearly, so she emphasized once again that the two of them were just friends. Since it was only a conversation between friends, what could possibly happen? Soon, it was time for dinner. Unexpectedly, Len was also seated at the dining table. This immediately caught Arya's attention. It seemed this attendant wanted to play matchmaker for his master, so she began analyzing his identity. Just as she was thinking, Oscar's gaze suddenly met hers. Seeing that Arya could not get a word in, his sympathy overflowed once again. And Cain, surprisingly, was also secretly observing all of this. At this moment, Miel was thanking Oscar for the gift he had brought, thinking she would receive an enthusiastic response from the one she loved. Unexpectedly, Oscar was staring at Arya in a daze. Miel saw every bit of the scene. Afterward, she took out a handkerchief she had sewn herself and gave it to her father. Looking at this seemingly innocent younger sister, Arya knew very well that things were far from as simple as they appeared. But she still cooperated and praised Miel a few times, only for Miel to push her luck. She had Emma bring out the handkerchiefs prepared for everyone, but Arya's was the only one missing, clearly intending to embarrass her on the spot. Len could not bear to watch, so he quickly handed her the handkerchief he had received. Who would have thought that Arya merely smiled faintly, then cleverly turned the situation around and easily defused Miel's scheme. This time, she failed again. After some more days passed, Arya wanted to find out the origin of that handkerchief, so she summoned Annie and had her do skincare for her. Then, using the excuse of taking her to a gathering, she casually inquired about the source of Miel's handkerchief. Sure enough, Annie let slip that Miel had asked a teacher for help. Arya fell into thought, knowing that such things had never happened before and that Miel had not embroidered it herself at all, but had merely added a few stitches casually. Arya understood that the time was ripe, so she gave Annie the exclusive golden badge, and from this moment on, Miel's loyal servants began to decrease little by little. The master of this man seemed to have taken a fancy to a young noble lady, so every few days, he kept sending packages after packages to the mansion. It was all to attract Miel's attention, but Miel seemed somewhat disdainful. After all, her heart already belonged to someone else. Her mother was somewhat worried, so she once again asked Len about his master's identity, but he still kept his mouth shut. He only said that his master had once happened to meet Miel and had developed feelings for her because of it. Arya listened carefully from the side, wanting to use the hourglass to probe Len's background, so she began reasoning it out slowly. She believed that Len's master must be a foreign noble. Otherwise, he could only be the crown prince. Len was obviously startled upon hearing this, not expecting Arya's thinking to be so meticulous. But even though she pressed him all the way, He still did not reveal any useful information, and Arya could only pretend not to care at all. But in reality, she was panicking inside. If the other party were just some foolish noble, that would be one thing, but if he became Miel's backer, then he would definitely become a huge problem in the future. At this moment, Len quietly glanced at her and had already reached a judgment in his heart. The next day, Arya sat up from bed with sleepy eyes, and Jessie noticed at once that her eyes were somewhat swollen. She hurriedly brought cool water and carefully wiped them for her. Arya was going to attend her first gathering after coming of age, and Annie appeared behind her, apparently having put in quite a bit of effort for this outing. She carefully asked Arya what she thought, unable to hide the delight in her heart. After arriving at the tea party, the young ladies immediately noticed Annie standing behind Arya. Naturally, they lavished her with praise, and seeing that the timing was right, Arya smoothly brought up the main topic. She began talking about the coming-of-age ceremony, and upon hearing this, the young ladies immediately crowded around in a rush. All of them wanted to tell Arya about Miss Sarah's situation, and just as they were speaking, Sarah arrived late, holding a bouquet of flowers. It turned out that the Marquis had sent a messenger over, which had delayed her. The young ladies hurriedly asked Sarah what exactly had happened after the coming-of-age ceremony. Sarah said shyly that at the time, her handkerchief had fallen to the ground. After the Count picked it up, he even examined it carefully for a while. Then he suddenly said that he wanted that handkerchief, so Sarah blushingly gave it to him. Afterward, he even took the initiative to invite her to dance. Who would have thought that the Marquis, who appeared cold on the surface, would be so thoughtful? As Arya listened to Sarah's story, she was not the least bit surprised in her heart, because she knew that Sarah would definitely end up with the Marquis in the end, and then she changed the subject. She hoped Sarah would set aside the other party's status and qualifications, and only because of love, or simply because she liked him, choose to be with him. After all, what she truly wished for was simply for Sarah to be happy. After hearing this, Sarah was deeply moved. Everyone present was also happy because of it, except for Annie, who stood frozen in place. She was incomparably shocked that a commoner could marry into a wealthy, noble family. That's right, as long as she also had such an opportunity, she would definitely be able to climb into the nobility, and only she could help her reach that step. And this was precisely the meaning of bringing Annie to the gathering. So, what kind of choice would Annie make? This girl who had only just come of age was actually turning around and teaching her own governess how to fall in love. She looked like a novice who had just entered the field, but in reality, she was a beauty who had been pursued by countless men. Sarah imagined in her mind the scene Arya had described, both shy and delighted, already planning to win over the Marquis in one stroke. Arya gave her advice and told her to give him a pair of gloves so that the Marquis would definitely be deeply impressed. Sarah praised Arya's idea as brilliant, while in fact, all of this was experience Arya had summed up after conquering countless men. Just as Sarah was about to leave, she suddenly noticed a newly arrived carriage parked at the entrance, and upon looking closely, the one who had come was actually Len. He politely stepped forward and asked to have tea with Miss Miel, and also wanted to say a few words in passing. Arya, however, used the reason that without a guardian's permission, Len could not be allowed to have tea alone with an unmarried young lady, and stopped him at the door on the spot. Her real thought was actually that she disliked how Len was always bringing gifts to Miel, so she absolutely would not let those two meet alone. Sarah noticed that Arya's expression did not look very good, and her protective instincts were instantly stirred. So she suggested that the four of them have tea together, and Len tacitly agreed. Afterward, he handed over a gift prepared for Arya, and it was still that bouquet of tulips. Arya smiled slyly, and based on the color of the flowers, immediately concluded that Len's master must be an imperial noble. This shocked Len immensely. The three sat together drinking tea, while Arya's heart was full of questions. Could his master really be the crown prince? So she had Annie bring the hourglass and began questioning the Len before her. She wanted to know why he kept coming to this mansion every few days. It turned out that his master valued Miel's ability to gather information, and even the fur business cooperation with the Marquis had adopted her suggestion. Arya's pupils shook. This was clearly my idea. Could it be that the relationship between my father and me had never improved at all? He had actually given all the credit to his own biological daughter. Arya trembled with anger. Len immediately continued. Miel did not seem to be as meticulous as the rumor said. Arya coldly mocked Miel. After that, she could no longer suppress the emotions in her heart. She lost her temper on the spot, and this clearly frightened Sarah badly. The young lady's sudden reaction clearly frightened Sarah badly. Arya also realized that she had lost her composure. She hurriedly turned over the hourglass, letting everything return to the starting point. She told herself inwardly that she absolutely had to calm down. Then, after a long wait, Miel finally arrived late, and after some brief pleasantries, Len immediately asked her what she thought about casinos. Arya knew this was a probing question, but she had not expected Miel to truly know nothing at all. When she heard her say that they should erect a statue of the crown prince at the entrance of the casino, Arya still could not hold it in and laughed out loud directly, and Len also looked somewhat embarrassed. Immediately after, he turned and probed Arya for any brilliant opinions. Who would have thought that Arya not only analyzed everything clearly and logically, but also took the opportunity to sarcastically mock Miel for understanding nothing. This left Len beside them staring in amazement. Miel's expression also instantly turned ugly, and she did not know how to respond. For the sake of making money, this man actually came running to the mansion again and again. He planned to discuss business matters with the Count, and also asked the Count's biological daughter Miel for her opinion in passing, but unexpectedly, she naively thought that lightweight clothing would become the next popular product. Arya laughed so hard she trembled after hearing this. It seemed that no matter who heard this idea, they would find it ridiculous. To ease the awkward atmosphere, Father turned and asked Arya again, fantasizing that this clever adopted daughter could give the answer he wanted, but this time Arya was on guard. She actually turned around and agreed with Miel's suggestion, because she had no intention of letting these two pitiful fools get an advantage for nothing. Seeing that Arya had not taken the bait, Len and Father both showed a trace of disappointment in their expressions. Arya felt that rather than letting them reap the benefits effortlessly, it would be better for her to focus on studying and improving her own abilities. At this time, Annie burst in, wanting to ask for leave to go see the festival, and Arya agreed without even thinking. Soon, it was the day of the festival. Seeing Annie dressed far too plainly, Arya immediately panicked. She quickly took out several exquisite outfits. Only this way could she make the other maids feel envious. After Annie changed her clothes, she left happily. Just as Arya wanted to quietly continue reading, she noticed Jessie standing behind her. After asking for a while, Jessie also said that she wanted to attend the festival. It was only because of work that she had always felt too embarrassed to actively ask Arya for leave, who knew that Arya did not even turn her head and directly granted the leave, which instead made Jessie a little uneasy. She had a sudden idea and suggested going to the festival together with Arya, and so the three of them walked along the lively streets. Arya recalled everything from the past and still felt some lingering fear in her heart, though fortunately none of it would happen again. She bought 2 skewers of grilled meat and gave them to the two of them. Sitting beside the fountain, she listened to the street singers sing of winter leaving and spring coming. The revenge plan had already completed its initial groundwork, but if she lived only to destroy someone else's life, could she really be happy? Arya could not help but sink into thought. As saw her in the crowd, he quickly stepped forward to strike up a conversation and even politely exchanged a few pleasantries. Unexpectedly, what he got first was a glare from Arya. She had originally wanted to pretend she had not seen him, but the man standing beside her carried an almost fatal kind of attraction. This forced Arya to continue the conversation. At this time, Jessie and the attendant also noticed. They even planned to draw their swords against him, but as companions suddenly dashed out. He leaned close and whispered a few words into his ear, but as still sent the man away, apparently wanting to talk with Arya a little longer. So he took the chance to ask Arya why she was dressed so plainly today. The implication was clearly, "Why are you not wearing the clothes I gave you?" But he had no idea that he had sent them to the wrong person from the very beginning. Arya only found it baffling and was just thinking of slipping away. But suddenly, an explosion sounded not far away, and in the urgency, Az grabbed Arya's hand. He ran in the direction opposite the crowd. This woman completely lost her composure amid the sound of the explosion. And at this moment, a strange man reached out his hand and passed warmth into her palm. No, this feeling made her heartbeat suddenly race. This was a wild, out-of-control heartbeat she had never experienced before. Az pulled Arya's hand and ran against the crowd, and Arya, in the firelight of the explosion, amid the wails of the crowd, felt that warm hand. She felt that hand was like her salvation, tightly binding the two of them together. The two of them ran all the way until they were out of breath, and when Arya finally came back to her senses, she abruptly flung away Az's hand, and a wave of discomfort immediately arose in her heart. She felt that lately, whenever she panicked, she would lose her reason, and to have actually mistaken the hand of a man like this for a saving hand was simply absurd. Az awkwardly tried to comfort her, and also handed over the handkerchief someone at the festival had given him just now, asking whether she wanted to wipe herself. Arya refused directly, thinking to herself that perhaps this person wanted to see her make a fool of herself. After calming down a little, she realized that she had already run very far, so she asked where exactly this place was. With a bright smile, Az answered that he had only brought her running all the way out, and that even he did not know where this was. She put the handkerchief back into his hand, and Arya was practically going mad. She felt that her irrationality just now had been such a failure. How could she have given someone like this an opportunity to take advantage during such chaos? She looked around and realized that no matter how she looked at it, this was a place completely unfamiliar to her. She suddenly felt a little afraid. Had they already run to the edge outside the city? She wanted to hurry back before she completely lost hold of herself, and as the sound of her footsteps showed she was preparing to leave. Az asked her where she was going, and she could only helplessly say that she wanted to go back, but simply could not find the way, as suggested going over there because the night sky in that direction was a little brighter. Arya stopped awkwardly, but in the end she still followed him over there, with a hint of teasing, as asked whether she wanted him to carry her, and she was instantly startled and shouted something. She was indeed already very tired, but her attitude was firm. No matter how tired she was, she absolutely did not want to owe him a favor. She took off her high heels and quickly walked forward, while Iz laughed softly behind her. He thought that her forcing herself like this was somehow better than letting him carry her. Arya puffed with indignation as she walked ahead, while Iz stayed behind her the whole time. He even told her that maybe he would be someone useful to her. Arya directly denied it and mocked him coldly, saying that in this situation, trying to build a good image was completely impossible. But Iz told her that she did not understand him at all. Arya thought that people like them were all the same. Az denied this and said that he understood Miss Arya quite well. Arya thought that he had merely believed those rumors about her, but what is said next was completely different. Arya instantly became flustered and turned around to glare at him fiercely, but Az looked at her with an extremely affectionate gaze. Arya's heartbeat suddenly quickened, and she suddenly realized that every time she met those eyes, it was hard for her to look away again, as though she were gazing into a beautiful shade of blue, mysterious and gentle. Taking advantage of her distraction, Az leaned close to her ear and told her that it would not be long before she knew who he was. And when she was willing to come a little closer to him, he said with certainty that they would definitely meet again very soon. Afterward, the guards finally found Arya, and after offering a round of concern, they told her that the festival was also about to end. Arya felt that everything that had just happened was unreal, but it had not been a dream. Afterward, she followed the guards back to the festival. After returning, the guards told Arya the cause of the explosion, and several people discussed it in low voices nearby. But Arya was still thinking about that boy just now, guessing that he was probably a noble who had come here from the countryside. The more she thought, the angrier she became. A guard interrupted her thoughts and told her what he had just heard about Miss Ilya. It was said that Ilya had written a letter to Miss Frederick. This woman's background was far too tragic. Her husband had killed himself because he could not bear the pressure of enormous debt. With nowhere left to turn, she could only serve nobles to repay the debt, yet the debt did not decrease at all. Even the child in her womb was lost because of overwork. A noble discovered this pitiful woman. Because she looked familiar, he took her in as his personal maid, but even though she was formally employed and became a senior maid, this noble lady passed away because of excessive blood loss during childbirth. And this woman had no choice but to take responsibility for raising that girl. The little girl gradually grew up and became a sweet and lovely young lady. Later, the girl went to visit Miss Frederick. The lady warmly received her, and the girl had long since been unable to wait to see Oscar. But Miss Frederick wanted to spend a little more time alone with the girl, so she told Oscar to come back a little later. Hearing this, the girl revealed a sweet smile. Miss Frederick praised the girl and told her that although Oscar usually obeyed her in everything, she also did not want his future partner to become his burden. And then she praised the girl again, saying she would be a perfect wife. But the girl revealed a troubled expression and told the lady that she normally found it difficult to meet Mr. Oscar and hated her own lack of ability because she had no way to help her husband. Miss Frederick comforted her, saying she need not worry, that she would definitely become engaged to Oscar, and that this was also what she hoped for. The girl once again showed a sweet smile, her joy almost impossible to hide from her face. To gain Miss Frederick's approval was something very difficult indeed, because she was now the top candidate to become the crown princess, and if the girl could become family with her, no one would ever bully her again. Not long after, Oscar returned, looking somewhat surprised and somewhat guilty as he glanced toward Miss Frederick. The girl immediately went up to him and fussed over him with concern. But Oscar seemed somewhat repulsed by these actions, and Miss Frederick muttered quietly from the side that they were people who would spend their whole lives together. But Oscar replied rather speechlessly that he was not engaged yet. The lady smiled and said that although the girl was still underage, Oscar's personality should not be so rigid. After hearing this, the girl instantly felt overjoyed and began fantasizing about the wonderful life she would have after entering noble society. No one would dare bully her again, nor would there be any more stains on her life, and after a few years, becoming one of the people here already seemed only natural. Afterward, Miss Frederick left together with Oscar. On the way home, the lady kept reminding Oscar to get closer to the girl, and that even if she became crown princess in the future, he still had to associate more with other capable nobles. But Oscar still had his concerns. Miss Frederick sensed that something was wrong and mentioned that rumor. The rumor said that Oscar was closely associating with the daughter of a prostitute. Oscar froze on the spot when he heard it. Miss Frederick also saw something from his reaction, so she mercilessly slapped Oscar. She also mocked him coldly for a while, and Oscar hurriedly tried to explain something. But Miss Frederick gave him no chance to speak at all, only telling him to obediently listen. Between the lines, she was also implying that in the future, he would no longer have the right to make his own decisions. Oscar felt very wronged because she was not that kind of person from the rumor at all. A few days later, the girl received a letter from Oscar. The maids all praised how thoughtful Oscar was toward the girl, and the girl modestly accepted the letter. But in reality, she was already overjoyed inside. Yet just as the maids continued flattering her, the girl's expression suddenly stiffened. It turned out that what was written in the letter was the bad news that Oscar told her they could no longer correspond in the future. This seemed to be just an ordinary farewell letter, but it concerned this woman's future life. Her whole mentality collapsed in an instant, and the maids around her became as anxious as ants on a hot pan. In her heart, this woman repeated Oscar's name over and over again with resentment. Not long afterward, a maid rushed into her room and told her that the younger sister downstairs had also received a letter. But the letter her younger sister received was completely different from hers. In the letter, Oscar had written sweet words as if surrounded by pink bubbles, and no one could believe that Oscar would write such things. This must have been ghostwritten by Miss Frederick. Only then did the woman suddenly understand. She had always thought that as long as she held on to Oscar, everything could be solved. But she had forgotten that the truly difficult person was that lady. Whether her younger sister could marry Oscar depended entirely on that lady. Even if Oscar was still willing to write letters to this woman, that would not solve any problem at all. The woman dropped to her knees on the floor and cried in despair. Afterward, at the dining table, this woman looked at the glittering hair ornament on her younger sister's head with extreme jealousy, her heart full of hatred toward her. Her younger sister was exchanging pleasantries with guests, and bursts of cheerful laughter kept coming over. This woman's heart itched with madness, and she even thought about twisting her younger sister's neck and then running away. The guest was discussing taxes with her younger sister, who naively wanted to solve it through simple personal connections. From the side, this woman mocked that without Mr. Len, the family could do nothing at all. Afterward, the woman proposed a suggestion: build a warehouse near the capital so that whenever needed they would only have to transport things there, and the taxes would also be greatly reduced. After hearing this, Mr. Len was astonished. Everyone also instantly understood and felt that this suggestion was very useful. After hearing it, the younger sister seemed somewhat flustered. She immediately pointed out what was inappropriate about it, but the woman at once refuted her. The younger sister exclaimed that furs could be sold at a high price, and the guard beside them even flatteringly told the younger sister that if she had not predicted that fur would become fashionable, this tax issue would not have arisen. Mr. Len really could not keep listening, so he quickly came out to smooth things over, celebrating that they had found a solution. In her heart, the woman silently recited that even knowing the future was useless. In the end, she had only become a slightly smarter young lady, but the truly important problem still could not be solved, and nothing could be changed. She threw herself onto the bed all at once. Her face was full of sorrow and helplessness, because even if she begged Oscar not to cut off their correspondence, it still could not change anything, and even if she had overshadowed her younger sister today, it was meaningless. Could it be that she could only go on like this, fearing every day that she would be beheaded and lying awake all night? Could it be that her life could only stop here like this? This woman had dressed herself up elaborately, looking as gaudy as a flower in full bloom, as she prepared to meet her fiancé's sister. Under her father's instructions, she got into the carriage and left. Annie watched all of this unfold and let out a cold laugh. Then she went off muttering curses under her breath and reported the matter to Arya. But unexpectedly, Arya showed no interest at all and looked utterly exhausted. After all, she had cried over Oscar the night before. When Arya asked about Miel's outfit today, Annie pointed out that all of those clothes had been sent by Ashish. Arya let out a soft sigh. Today was Ashish's birthday. Miel and the other nobles had all been invited to attend. This banquet would also determine Ashish's future status, while she herself would die once again amid struggle. Thinking of this, Arya felt that everything was beyond saving, so she made up an excuse and drifted off into a groggy sleep. Annie and Jessie looked at each other, both terribly worried about their young lady's condition. Meanwhile, Miel arrived at Ashish's birthday banquet. At the banquet, she stayed close to the hostess and moved through the gathering with ease. Countless noble ladies stepped forward one after another to speak with Ashish. Seeing this, Miel came up with a plan and used the topic of her father to draw attention to herself, and the two of them chatted quite pleasantly. Meanwhile, Oscar arrived late under everyone's gaze. He politely greeted everyone, and his handsome appearance made it impossible for Miel to look away. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Miel felt that Oscar's heart seemed to be slowly returning to its proper place as well. Ashish also took the opportunity to play matchmaker. Although the marriage was already practically set in stone, Miel still could not help feeling shy. At that moment, the butler hurried over to make a report. To everyone's surprise, the crown prince had suddenly come to visit, and everyone was utterly shocked when they heard the news. Immediately afterward, everyone quickly assumed the proper posture, all thinking that a marriage between the crown prince and Ashish was only natural. Miel even naively believed that the crown prince had truly come to wish Ashish a happy birthday. Only Oscar felt that something was wrong, because his sister's actions today were clearly pressuring the imperial family, so the crown prince's arrival at this moment could not possibly mean anything good. Ashish, too, was somewhat embarrassed and angry, completely unable to guess what this man was trying to do. But for the sake of appearances, she could only bow to him respectfully, never expecting that Az would not take it seriously at all and would merely greet her in haste. Then, he looked straight at Miel beside Ashish. All this time, he had mistaken Arya for Miel, but now, looking at the woman before him, he realized that she was actually much shorter than he remembered. Miel looked utterly bewildered, completely unable to understand what was going on, and Ashish was equally stunned. The crown prince had actually come to Miel specifically at her own birthday banquet, unless Miel truly had some private connection with him. Just as Az was smugly preparing to reveal his identity, Miel raised her head in confusion, and Az suddenly widened his eyes. The woman standing before him was not the one he had been longing for at all. His heart shattered on the spot. So then, where exactly was the woman he loved now? This woman was truly an expert at pretending, putting on a gentle and kind appearance on the surface, while behind the scenes she was still complaining under her breath. After the crown prince left, Miel's legs went weak and she nearly lost her footing, but fortunately Oscar caught her in time. Ashish hurriedly pressed Miel for answers, wanting to know exactly what had happened between her and His Highness the Crown Prince. But Miel said that she had no idea what had happened, that it was her first time meeting His Highness, and that she did not understand at all what he meant by the real young lady. Looking at Miel, who was still sobbing nonstop, Ashish also felt a trace of sympathy. She even put on a pained expression as if she truly cared for the child, and so, she told Oscar to take Miel to rest first. But as soon as Miel left, she immediately began complaining behind her back in a low voice, thinking that children really were troublesome. On the other hand, she also felt that this was actually a good opportunity, because Oscar had always been easily affected by those who looked pitiful and delicate. If she could use this opportunity to make Oscar truly focus his feelings on Miel, then that would not be a bad thing at all. After comforting Miel, Ashish began dealing with the awkwardness caused by the Crown Prince's appearance. She greeted the guests with a smile and made a few harmless jokes, and everyone once again marveled that she truly deserved to be the future Crown Princess, with every move so graceful and considerate. Secretly, Ashish also sent people to investigate what exactly had happened between Miel and the Crown Prince. An ominous feeling rose in Ashish's heart, and she felt that some things were slowly slipping out of control. Arya ate the delicate desserts prepared by the servants, while repeatedly telling herself in her heart to take things less hard. By evening, Arya saw that Oscar had brought Miel back. Miel's father blamed Oscar for bringing her back so late, while Oscar explained that an accident had happened at the banquet, and afterward Miel had fallen asleep, so he could not bear to wake her. The Count did not pursue the matter further, and only reminded Oscar that they were still underage, and not yet officially married. Oscar had originally intended to say goodbye and leave, but unexpectedly, the Count kept him there and told him to stay the night. Arya had not expected that Oscar would not even glance at her. She had thought she had already sorted out her emotions, but unexpectedly, as long as she saw Oscar, her heart still ached unbearably. Late at night, Arya could not fall asleep no matter what, so she left her room and took a casual walk outside. Unexpectedly, she happened to run into Oscar. Just as she was about to greet him, Oscar turned and walked into a room. Arya felt that she could not let this opportunity slip by, so she used the hourglass, and this time, she finally managed to stop Oscar. Crying, she told Oscar that she hoped he would not abandon her. Arya buried her head against Oscar's chest and murmured softly, her voice thick with tears. Yet Oscar did not seem to have any intention of embracing her back. Would Oscar actually agree to Arya's plea? When she woke up the next morning, Arya was completely unwilling to face the out-of-control self from last night. She had not expected that she would actually say those things to Oscar the night before, and that she would even lean against him like that. But Oscar had also shown sympathy toward Arya that night. After all, in that enormous mansion, she did not even have a single person she could trust. Only after Arya fell asleep did Oscar finally speak his true feelings. He said that he hoped Arya would not worry and that every choice he made was for her sake. If he could become Miel's husband, then they could become one family, and Miel would no longer be able to bully her as she pleased. He also hoped that one day Arya would understand his feelings. But for Arya now, there was still more pain in her heart than anything else, and she felt ashamed of herself for clinging to Oscar so desperately. But just then, Arya heard that Miel seemed to have called her friends over again to show off. Arya's servant came running over with an excited expression, saying that on the day Miel came back with Oscar, her eyes had been terribly swollen, because on that very day, the Crown Prince had appeared and had publicly questioned Miel. She also learned from a servant who had once worked here that the gifts Miel received had actually been prepared by Ashish's maid. Only then did Arya finally understand that Oscar had done nothing at all. All of this had been arranged by Ashish. After learning the truth, Arya immediately regained her energy. It was as if even her body had suddenly grown a little taller again, and in a great mood, Arya went out. As it happened, she ran into Miel and her friends. Smiling, Miel said that she had not seen Arya in a long time, and while smiling, she added that if Arya was not feeling well, she should obediently stay in her room and not come out. But Arya paid no attention at all to Miel's mockery and simply said lightly that she wanted to go out for some air today and buy a few clothes while she was at it. Arya smiled and said to the girls present, why was it that she had suddenly grown taller again? As she spoke, she deliberately looked at Miel and said that some people were clearly no longer very young, yet were still as petite as children. That kind of growth rate was truly enviable. Miel did not show it on the surface, but inwardly, she was already sick of Arya. As she walked down the road, Arya was also thinking. She knew that using the hourglass made her body drowsy, but she did not understand why. Every time she used the hourglass, her body would suddenly grow a little. Only then did Arya realize that perhaps turning back time itself was an exchange made with her life, and so she resolved to use the hourglass as little as possible in the future. When Arya went to buy clothes, she did not only buy new clothes for herself, but also bought a set for each of the 2 servants by her side. After that, they went to the Huashan Cafe. One of the servants, Annie, said that she had always wanted to come here, but that only nobles were allowed inside. Then Arya had the servant Jessie go buy a newspaper for her. At the same time, she also checked up on the recent situation of the newspaper seller she had helped before. In the paper, she saw a news item stating that the mastermind behind stealing noble clients was a high-ranking foreign noble. Arya suddenly realized that she might be able to make use of this information. She picked up the hourglass, preparing to go make money at the casino. Just then, a man downstairs saw her. So who could this man be? If a handsome stranger suddenly sent you flowers, how would it feel? Would it be awkwardness, panic, delight, or disgust? Arya sat in the cafe, listening to Annie talk about her brother's business, and felt that this matter might be able to help her. So she decided to take Annie to the casino in the future. But just then, a man holding flowers walked over. Arya was startled, because this man was none other than as the one who had saved her that day. In truth, there had barely been any interaction between the two of them, but as acted unusually familiar. At that moment, the maid quietly told Arya that Az had been standing downstairs for a long time earlier, looking in their direction the whole time. So Arya decided to have a proper talk with this man of unknown background and see what exactly Az was plotting. But Az only put on a mysterious air and said that he had merely happened to run into her. He then casually handed the tulips in his hand to Arya. But Arya showed no politeness and directly pointed out that she had received tulips like these before, and because these flowers were specially cultivated by the royal family, they could only be bought at flower shops near the palace. And the palace was not close to here at all, so this so-called coincidence was just a little too coincidental. But Az was not provoked by Arya's words in the slightest and continued to say with a smile that he had simply seen Miss Arya on the way, so he had hurried to buy a bouquet and followed after her, though he had not expected that Miss Arya would still remember the flowers he had sent last time. Arya was instantly at a loss for words. The one who had sent flowers last time was clearly Len, so what did that have to do with Az? And she had already spoken so bluntly, yet has still remained perfectly composed. Could it be that he really had been captivated by her beauty? Az suddenly changed the subject and said that the real reason he had come this time was that he was very interested in the matter of Rost's fur consultant. Rost definitely would not have leaked this matter on his own. Could it have been that blabbermouth Len spreading it around everywhere? In her heart, Arya cursed Len hundreds of times over, but Az once again shifted the topic and said that because he had heard Arya was very clever, he wanted to invite her to a gathering specifically for discussing political and economic topics. But Arya felt that this was highly inappropriate. This man was not familiar with her at all, yet he was suddenly inviting her to a gathering, and such a setting would be full of men. Arya asked Az in return whether he was not afraid that her reputation would be damaged. Az told Arya that this gathering was simply for academic discussion, and that he looked forward to Arya showing her knowledge. Although most of the participants were men, absolutely no one would gossip behind her back, because those without proper breeding were not qualified to enter that gathering at all. Arya was somewhat tempted. In such a feudal and male-dominated society, the chance for a woman like herself to attend such a gathering was already extremely rare. But could the man before her really be trusted? After Arya returned home, Len came again, and even very attentively gave Miel a bouquet of lilies. Arya was rendered speechless by the sight, but the next second, Len turned around and gave Arya a bouquet of tulips. He also told Arya that these were flowers blooming in his master's garden. Looking at those familiar tulips, Arya froze on the spot for a moment. Arya was still thinking about the meaning behind Len's words. Why, of all things, would he specifically tell her that they were flowers from his master's garden? But at that moment, her thoughts were interrupted by her father, the Count. The Count told Arya that Len had feelings for her, and that this could be considered a rather good match. Arya was instantly shocked, because Len behaved frivolously, and not long ago he had clearly been very interested in Miel. More importantly, Len was only an attendant. Although she had long since been disappointed in her father, she had not expected that for the sake of profit, he really could use his own daughter as a bargaining chip. At that moment, Her younger sister Miel was still adding fuel to the fire from the side, saying that Arya and Len were simply perfectly matched. Arya immediately turned her head and replied, "If this blessing is so great, do you want it yourself?" Pretending not to understand, Miel said, had sister Arya forgotten? She already had Oscar. But Arya continued to fight back, saying that Oscar had not shown up for who knew how long, and that even the gifts had been sent through a maid. Watching his two daughters confront each other so sharply, the Count also realized that the atmosphere was wrong and hurried to smooth things over, saying that it seemed Arya had no plans to marry for the time being. The meal ended in an atmosphere thick with tension, and after Len left, Arya was just about to go back and rest. But unexpectedly, Len actually came back again. He handed Arya a letter and said that it was his master's intention, and that Arya absolutely had to read it herself. When Arya opened it, the one who had written the letter was actually Yaz. Len asked Arya whether she could accept his master's invitation, and only then did Arya finally realize that the one truly interested in her was not Len, but Len's master, Az. But Arya still could not understand one thing. Then, why had so many gifts been sent to Miel before? Len smiled awkwardly and said that it had simply been a case of mistaken identity, and that he hoped Arya would not take it to heart. Although she had finally figured things out now, Arya found it even harder to make a decision. First, she had no idea what his true identity was. Second, as could not possibly really have fallen for her, because she herself was actually quite dull. Len was utterly shocked to hear that, and could not understand at all why Arya would feel so inferior. In his view, Miss Arya was obviously very intelligent. Arya muttered silently to herself that it was only because of the hourglass, but in the end, she still agreed to attend that gathering. The noble young ladies gathered together, curious about where Arya's romantic experience had come from, since she had so effortlessly brought Sarah and the Marquis together. Arya could only say that she used to be a commoner, so she understood these romantic tricks rather well. But in her heart, she knew very clearly that Sarah and the Marquis being together had been destined from the beginning, and she had merely given things a small push. At this moment, Arya felt somewhat lost. Since when had she become so lacking in confidence? The labels from her past life could be erased bit by bit in this life with the hourglass, but when would this heart of hers, already on the verge of collapse, finally break completely? The maids were gathered together discussing which dress Arya should wear to the gathering. But Arya suddenly proposed that they serve as her accompanying maids, and Annie was instantly both surprised and delighted. At the same time, Arya also decided to recruit new maids. Yet at that exact moment, Miel sent over the spy Barry, so Arya could only accept her for the time being. The moment she thought about how Barry had constantly sown discord by her side in her previous life, Arya felt even more displeased. Again and again, she made Barry bring her tea, complaining that it was too hot, then too cold, saying it had spilled, or that the cup had been filled too full. She even specifically instructed Annie to properly train this newly arrived maid. Arya arrived on time for the appointment and attended as gathering. As soon as she entered, she indeed saw quite a few nobles. Everyone first introduced themselves politely, but Arya said bluntly that they could just call her by her name. Everyone sat together discussing the operation of the casino. Although Az spoke very naturally, everyone's attitude toward him was exceptionally respectful. Arya could not help but begin to wonder what his true identity really was. Someone suggested that, since the casino was now restricted on all sides and difficult to manage, and since it was no longer merely a place of entertainment, it should simply be shut down. But most of the radical nobles did not agree. First, casino taxes were a lucrative source of income, and second, other countries also valued this business highly, while the crown prince was still managing it personally. The casino had always been a powerful tool for winning over the nobility. If it were forcibly shut down all at once, the more it was suppressed, the more chaotic things would become. Instead, it would only breed illegal gambling and further widen the gap between rich and poor. Len proposed that operations could continue by imposing betting limits, but the problem was what standards should be used to set those limits, and whether the nobles would truthfully report their assets. That was equally a difficult issue. The argument gradually reached a fever pitch, but Arya, who had been sitting silently at the side all this time, suddenly spoke up. The decline of the casino was an inevitable trend, and the best solution was to throw this hot potato to the nobles. Everyone immediately objected, believing that this would damage the crown prince's reputation, and that people would only blame his highness for incompetent management. But Arya told them, from the perspective of short-term economic returns, the casino could indeed make a profit, but in the long run, it was beneficial neither to the country nor to the overall economy. It would even create hidden weaknesses in the management of funds and manpower. Rather than hesitating at a time like this, it would be better to simply hand the casino over to someone else to manage. The common people would instead praise His Highness's decisiveness and clarity, calling it a wise decision. Most importantly, the noble faction had always been a festering tumor to the royal family. Giving them this casino, which looked like a tempting prize on the surface, might seem like currying favor with them, but in reality, it would be weakening them. Wasn't that killing two birds with one stone? Everyone was impressed by Arya's wisdom, but the radical faction still pressed on, asking why Arya was so certain that the casino would definitely collapse. Just then, Az suddenly stepped forward and decided to adopt Arya's suggestion. At once, no one said anything more, and the meeting came to an end. Az kept Arya behind alone, praising her for a while, but Arya said directly, "Stop trying to gloss things over, mister. Az, who exactly are you?" The man before her was both familiar and unfamiliar, and beneath that handsome exterior, what kind of heart was actually hidden there? The less Arya could see through Az, the more easily she was drawn to him, and Az noticed this as well, so he concealed his identity layer by layer. But then he changed the subject and felt that his desire to get close to Arya's heart seemed a bit too eager, fearing that doing too much would instead backfire. Arya was momentarily speechless. This man did not seem to be simply attracted by her appearance alone. After thinking for a moment, Az believed that Arya had unique insights into current trends, and that everyone invited to this gathering was also that kind of person. Could this guy be some kind of intellectual collector? Arya could not help but complain inwardly, then continued pressing Az about his true identity. Looking at Arya's beautiful face, Az knew very well that even if he revealed his identity as the crown prince now, it would not bring Arya any help. So he lowered his head deeply and asked Arya to give him a little more time. For now, Az was only a mysterious supporter deeply attracted by Arya's intelligence and talent. Hearing those almost moving words, Arya's face instantly turned red. She began to find herself unable to look directly at Az's face. Those azure eyes were gentle and clear, and little by little, Az took the initiative away from her. To hide her fluster, Arya turned her head aside, but her instincts told her that this man meant no harm. Clearly, every time she wanted to get to the bottom of things, she would always lose to Az's elegant and composed evasiveness. By now, these things no longer seemed all that important. Arya turned and walked up the steps, but Az suddenly asked, "Miss, what do you think of me?" Faced with Az's question, Arya voiced her guess, saying that she thought Az might be a prince. But if he really were that person engaged to the princess, how could he be running around so casually like this? Before Arya could even finish speaking, Az came up behind her, as if he wanted to sincerely praise this young lady. Arya quickly covered her face with her hat and stated her conclusion. Az was nothing more than a noble she did not know. Hearing that, Az seemed finally to breathe a sigh of relief. He even invited Arya to continue attending gatherings like this in the future. Arya said she would think about it, but in her heart she had already quietly made up her mind, and afterward returned to the estate. Looking at the large bouquet of tulips, Niel concluded that Len must have given them to Arya. So she and her father both rashly assumed that Len had already taken a liking to Arya in their household. They even deliberately went to ask Mother what she thought. Seeing this, Arya immediately used the topic of the warehouse to divert everyone's attention. Looking at Niel's hypocritical and affected manner, Arya knew very clearly that she could not delay any longer. She had to carve out her own path. A few days later, dressed in splendid clothes, she appeared at the casino with Annie. Arya ordered a glass of wine and quietly observed from the second floor for quite a while. After that, she decided to go downstairs and test the waters herself. Relying on the power of the hourglass, she kept winning for several days in a row. Now, even the onlookers began to grow restless. While receiving the admiration of the people around her, the hourglass by her side turned over again and again. But the side effects came one after another as well. How would Arya deal with them? If you also had an hourglass that could reverse time, what would you use it for? Arya used the hourglass to dominate the casino and fill her pockets to the brim. But at this moment, she was already utterly exhausted. Her winning streak also drew the jealousy of others. Originally, she would leave immediately after winning just one round each time, but today she still ended up being surrounded by others. Quite a few gamblers wanted to pry some gambling secrets out of Arya. At this critical moment, Annie and Arya could only split up and run. As the footsteps chasing behind them drew closer and closer, Arya was just about to be caught. At that very moment, however, a man wearing a golden lion mask suddenly appeared and took Arya into a private room. Sharp as she was, Arya immediately sensed that something was off, because that voice sounded strangely familiar. Az noticed that his disguise was about to be exposed and immediately turned his back to smooth things over, while those gamblers passed by outside the door following the sound. Arya did not even dare to breathe loudly. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, Az stopped her. He thought it was still not safe enough outside, so he kept Arya in the room a while longer. Az pushed open the door and had his attendant drive all those gamblers away, while he himself put on an entirely unconcerned expression. Taking the opportunity, he asked Arya about her gambling secret, and his polite and courteous attitude made Arya feel very much at ease. She could sense that this lion mask man meant no harm. All he had was the natural curiosity of a bystander, and he did not seem like some strange person. Arya calmly made up a lie, claiming that she merely trusted in her own ability. After all, luck was originally part of strength too. Az was immediately stunned, and just then there came a knock at the door. It seemed those gamblers had already been successfully driven away. Az was instantly somewhat speechless. Who told you to be this efficient? But the attendant, like a straight-laced blockhead, actually replied seriously with a thank you. Now there was no reason left to keep Arya there any longer, so As could only politely see her off. Afterward, he took off his mask and discussed the next plan with his attendant. It turned out he had already laid a trap beforehand. He said that running the casino had already become a heavy burden to him, so he hoped Viscount Weeg would buy the casino from him. Unexpectedly, the other party had taken the bait so quickly. Next, As planned to make the nobles rely on the casino even more boldly, and then shut the casino down all at once. By that time, the casino would no longer belong to the Crown Prince. The farce of the nobles fighting among themselves was bound to be very entertaining, and all of this was making use of mankind's endless greed for property. The Crown Prince decided to use this opportunity to carry out a thorough rectification, but once the matter blew up, the manipulations the Rost family had made using customs warehouse tax issues would probably become very difficult to handle. The current law could not restrict this either, and no one knew, which nobody had proposed such a suggestion in the first place. Seeing Vika's veiled accusations right in front of him, As was clearly displeased inside, but he could not very well lash out, so he could only have him thrown out directly. As for himself, he sat there alone in a daze, once again thinking of Arya's face. Enchanting girl, where exactly will you lead me? Meanwhile, Arya returned to the estate and removed her makeup. Since she had already earned enough money, there was no need to go back to the casino anymore. So she had Annie call her brother over, preparing to begin the next step of her plan. This man's name was Andro, and he had been called over by his younger sister to help. Faced with Arya's request, Andro was somewhat dumbfounded for a moment, because the task Arya gave him was actually to buy sugar, and as much of it as possible. Her goal was to monopolize sugar. After all, sugar was one of the luxuries of the nobility. As long as she seized the market first, it would surely bring endless wealth. Arya attended a tea party of noble young ladies, and the ladies were all talking animatedly about the recent situation. Faced with this sudden gathering, Arya knew very well that these small families without territories simply had no way to develop trade. So they could only come curry favor with the Count, and if she was going to make a move, she should start with those small families attached to the noble faction and engaging in monopolistic trade. Arya quickly had a target in mind, but on second thought, the noble faction would never take the initiative to target her, so that only left the Crown Prince's faction. Could it be that the Crown Prince's faction had borrowed the hands of foreigners? Thinking of this, Arya only felt her head ache, because once she got dragged into something like this, it would be hard to pull herself back out. The more Arya thought about it, the more deeply she sank, almost falling into it completely. So much so that she did not even hear Sarah calling her, and the whole person gave a start from fright. Looking at Arya's troubled expression, Sarah thought Arya was worrying about her father's matter, so she immediately took both of Arya's hands tightly. Seeing Sarah's sincere expression, Arya could only go along and put on a pitiful and delicate look. After all, even if the Rost family really collapsed, the remaining property would still be enough for them to live on for 3 generations. Sarah quietly told Arya that the Marquis had actually confessed to her, and then took the opportunity to invite Arya to dinner. She said she wanted to thank her for everything she had done for her. Her investment had finally paid off, so Arya was naturally delighted. After some more time passed, Arya attended as small gathering as usual. Sure enough, the meeting was discussing nothing but those nobles whose customers had been snatched away, but contrary to what she had imagined. These people actually all seemed especially happy that the noble faction was being targeted, and Arya was a little dumbfounded for a moment. After all, many of the people present were nobles themselves. Could it be that they all collectively had some strange masochistic tendency? Just as Arya was drinking water to wet her throat, Len suddenly said that Viscount Weeg had bought the Crown Prince's casino, which instantly shocked Arya. Everyone's eyes immediately turned to her in unison, while Az calmly observed Arya. "Woman, what makes you think I wouldn't? Oh no, what makes you think the Crown Prince wouldn't sell the casino?" Arya recalled memories of her previous life. At that time, because of poor management of the casino, the Crown Prince had eventually ended up closing it and had been cursed by the people to no end. But of course Arya could not possibly say such a thing aloud, so she could only casually find some excuse to brush it off. As continued, suppose the Crown Prince merely took over the casino temporarily and afterwards sold it to the truly suitable person. Wouldn't the outcome then be completely different? When Arya thought it through carefully, she instantly understood the Crown Prince faction's real intention. But with the prince's ability, could he really make that kind of judgment and arrangement? Wouldn't that still be a little too far-fetched? Deep in thought, Arya walked upstairs, but as called out to her from behind. Their gazes met once again, and what greeted her was still as undisguised praise for Arya. And these recent, gradually more open-hearted exchanges really had made her feel much more at ease. If only Oscar could be like this too. Back at the estate, Miel was dressed up elaborately. She was already prepared to welcome the princess. The carriage moved slowly forward, and the people on the street kept talking. Everywhere, people were discussing the news that Viscount Weeg had acquired the casino. Sitting in the carriage, Ashish looked thoroughly displeased. In her view, compared with buying the casino cheaply, it would have been better to keep using the casino to suppress the crown prince. Just which nobody had come up with this rotten idea, causing the noble faction to suffer instead. Miel had already been waiting at the estate for quite some time. At Ashish's arrival, her heart was full of joy. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Ashish presented premium black tea as a gift. Borrowing the afternoon sunlight, the two sat in the courtyard chatting casually. Ashish noticed the brooch on Miel's chest. It was actually exactly the same as Oscar's, and after hearing that, Miel could not hide her delight. But the truth was nothing like that. The scheming Ashish had long guessed that Oscar's brooch had been given by Arya, so she had specially ordered an identical one made and given it to Miel. Miel truly was quite an actress. Even though she clearly knew it had not been given by Oscar, she could still act the part to this extent. This was what a real noble young lady was like, fawning over those of higher status, oppressing the commoners of lower status, and displaying perfect flexibility in bending and stretching according to the situation. In comparison, Count Ross seemed far too casual, actually letting a prostitute marry into a noble household. Inwardly, Ashish silently cursed Count Ross. Then she changed the subject and said she wanted to see Arya to find out what kind of face this vicious woman actually had. But unexpectedly, the moment Arya appeared, that dazzling brilliance almost made even Ashish unable to keep her eyes open. After a simple salute, Arya sat down opposite Ashish. Their statuses were worlds apart, so Ashish naturally made things difficult for her in every possible way. The feeling was like a hungry wolf staring at a tiny chihuahua in front of it. Arya felt somewhat resentful inside that Annie had not told her beforehand that Ashish was coming, but as long as she did not let herself be caught on any pretext, she would be able to return to her room and sleep smoothly afterward. Sure enough, just as expected, Ashish began asking Arya what she thought of the taste of this tea. Ashish deliberately pressed Arya about the flavor of the tea, clearly intending to use the chance to humiliate her. But unexpectedly, Arya not only accurately described the tea's taste, she even answered its name. Ashish instantly felt somewhat embarrassed, and so had Arya withdraw and return to her room. Fortunately, Arya had used the hourglass in advance to reverse the situation. Otherwise, she probably would have been mercilessly mocked by those two wicked women just now. After this incident, Arya also completely understood that, to her, Ashish was an extremely dangerous existence. Annie hurried over to apologize and also brought Arya news from her brother. Just from reading the contents of the letter, it was clear that the price of sugar had already been driven up dozens of times over. The conflicts among the nobles had also begun erupting layer after layer. At the dining table, Miel had no interest at all in the dessert before her. Rost also knew very well that food without sugar was destined not to taste good. But the new sugar transporter had once again been held up at customs by the crown prince. Listening to Rost grumble on and on, Arya put herself in his place for a moment. If she were the crown prince, she probably would not sympathize with these greedy nobles either. Meanwhile, because the sugar estate had monopolized sugar, countless nobles were scrambling to come and buy it. They even snatched sugar away at 30 and 40 times the original price, and the conflicts among the nobles began escalating continuously. Thus, a war without smoke quietly began. The current price of sugar, after being monopolized, had already risen to 30 times what it had originally been. Annie was somewhat at a loss for a moment. If Miss sold it personally, wouldn't she be able to earn even more? But Arya did not think so. Her goal had never been to reap huge profits from sugar, but to make the nobles fight each other until their heads bled over it. Annie looked completely bewildered, but Arya suddenly called out to Barry, who was hiding nearby. With a cold face, she questioned Barry about why she still could not get the temperature of the tea right, and why she could not even make the cookies taste a little sweet. Barry had just wanted to explain that sugar had now become absurdly expensive, but before the words could even leave her mouth, she was already scolded harshly. Annie also added fuel to the fire from the side, but what she said did remind Arya of something. In the past, when she found food unpalatable, she would buy perfume as a substitute comfort, and sweet fragrances could likewise make people feel happy. While Arya was carefully thinking this over, she suddenly remembered that she still did not feel she had tormented Barry enough. So she continued instructing her to do other things. As Arya flipped through books and checked information, she thought of the perfume she had bought from Buvens before. Although it smelled sweet and lovely, unfortunately, the owner had never had the funds to expand the business, so once perfume truly became popular, he was quickly suppressed by the nobles. Then it's decided, Arya intended to give him a chance. Some time later, Baron Buvens received a letter sent by Arya. The letter asked only for 30% of the profits, as if it were certain the perfume would definitely become a huge success, yet the signature was merely Investor A. A few weeks later, Arya received a gift sent by Buvens. In the letter, he not only thanked her for her foresight, but also included a cravat. But this was originally a gift meant for a man, and Arya could not help falling into thought. It seemed that Buvens had mistaken her for a man, but her true identity could not be easily exposed. After thinking for a moment, she immediately had Annie prepare a carriage. She went to the clothing store to do some shopping, then changed into a brand new outfit. As soon as the sharply dressed Arya walked into Buvens's perfume shop, she directly asked to see the owner. After Buvens and Arya sat down face to face, he was almost instantly so charmed by the beauty before him that he lost his senses. Careless as he was, he had even met her directly like this, without knowing who she was. Arya was momentarily speechless when she told Buvens her identity. Buvens even slapped himself on the spot, feeling that becoming attracted to an underage girl was simply shameful to the extreme. Arya continued asking Buvens about the future direction of the product, but unexpectedly, he actually wanted to sell it at a more affordable price. He wanted ordinary people to be able to enjoy perfume as well, something that had originally belonged only to the nobility. Arya smiled faintly. It seemed she really had not invested in the wrong person, but on a first meeting, to say such ideals to a beautiful woman. After hearing that, Buvens's face instantly turned bright red, and so he also revealed that he unconditionally trusted Arya, as well as that anonymous investor. Arya calmly removed her cravat. As if nothing were unusual, she tied it around Buvens's neck. When he saw clearly what the cravat looked like, he instantly understood that the mysterious investor was actually Arya standing before him. The man panicked at once, because he had actually mistaken his own backer for a man. Seeing the gift he had given Arya returned to him just like that, completely untouched, Baron Buvens was utterly shocked, and only then did he finally realize that Arya was investor A. He hurriedly chased after her. He solemnly apologized for his discourtesy. By chance, Annie was standing in the corridor waiting. She had already bought all the perfume Arya needed. The moment Buvens heard the word buy, he looked as if he had been struck by lightning. The investor actually still had to spend her own money to buy things that was simply outrageous. So, he immediately had someone prepare a luxurious perfume gift box. He packed almost every variety in the shop into it and gave it to Arya as a gift. At the same time, he also gave Arya one of the shop's newly launched products, a bouquet of flowers that could retain its fragrance for a long time. Another bouquet was given to Annie standing beside them. Annie was briefly at a loss, but still accepted the bouquet of purple flowers with delight. Arya secretly glanced at her and felt this was the perfect opportunity to help market Annie to someone. So she conveniently introduced her, and Baron Buvens thus came to know Annie, still with those polite compliments as always. But even those formal words made Annie unable to stop herself from blushing, and Arya teased from the side. Baron Buvens had no resistance at all to beautiful women, and at the same time, she quietly reminded him that her real identity had to remain secret. On the way back, Annie had already completely fallen into love-struck foolishness. It could not be helped. Buvens was exactly the kind of man who flirted with others unintentionally, though that approach had little effect on Arya. But for Annie, whose heart had only just awakened to love, it was a fatal blow. Looking at Annie's excited appearance, Arya felt that the two of them were indeed well matched. If this marriage could really be made, then for the maids around them, and even for Arya herself, it would only bring benefits and no harm. But the question was, how exactly should she help Annie catch Buvens? The carriage also soon returned to the estate. The agarwood-scented perfume was not moved into Arya's room, but was first placed in the first floor parlor. Arya instructed Annie to distribute all this perfume to the maids. If the perfume ran out, then Annie was to personally go buy more. The moment Annie heard this, she was instantly overjoyed, because being able to see the Baron she had been longing for was enough to make her happy for an entire day. So before long, the perfume was almost used up. Happily dressed up, Annie went out to Buvens' shop to buy perfume. Seeing Annie arrive, Buvens was naturally very happy, but the content of their conversation almost never strayed from Arya, which made Annie feel somewhat disappointed. By evening, the downcast Annie returned to the estate, and Arya immediately noticed that something was off. So she asked what they had talked about today exactly. When Arya learned that Annie felt her own looks were inferior to hers, she instantly understood what Buvens had meant, and so she began brainwashing Annie. So-called love is, in essence, nothing more than weighing pros and cons. What you like is not Buvens himself, but his property. Just like that, Annie, who had originally been troubled by love, instantly stopped feeling sad. In her mind, only Miss Arya's theory remained. That night, because she still could not eat sugar, Miel continued to have no appetite for the food, but Arya ate with great enjoyment. Could it be that the flavor of the sauce had recovered? Just as Miel was wondering, she actually smelled a faint fragrance coming from the maids. At that moment, she finally understood everything. It seemed that everyone in the entire estate would gradually come to serve my purposes. That day, Len came to visit, still carrying armfuls of gift boxes. Arya originally thought they were for her, but to her surprise, they were for Miel again. Just then, Len had a male servant carry Arya's gift into her room. Arya responded absent-mindedly, not noticing that the door had been quietly closed. Then, the servant took off his hood, and it turned out to be Yaz. But Arya was not the least bit shocked, since as appearing and disappearing mysteriously around her had long since become normal. Because they had not seen each other for some time, The feelings between them had deepened even more, and this time as had come for no other reason. He had come especially to see Arya, and besides that, what could be more important? The moment Arya heard this, her face turned red at once, but she still could not help asking why he kept giving all the candy to Miel. As explained that it was because he wanted to spend more time with Arya, and only then did she finally feel relieved. Az immediately knew that Arya was jealous of Miel, and after being exposed on the spot, her face grew even redder. Was it really only because she was being used? Even she herself could not be convinced by the words she spoke. Az quietly moved closer and said in a low voice, "I swear that from now on, I will only give gifts to you alone." Soon after, he was called away by the arriving Len. Not long afterward, Jessie rushed in. She had come to bring afternoon tea to the young lady. Arya casually opened the gift box, only to find that inside was a gorgeous set of clothes. She thought to herself, could it be that because he had mistaken the person before, he had specially sent this over? Arya smiled happily. Now that Oscar no longer had any value to use, it seemed she had to find another way. Annie handed a stack of letters to Arya, saying that Baron Buvens had asked her to look them over. With a single sentence, Arya guessed that the Baron's attitude toward her had already changed. It seemed that with her help, those two were progressing quite well. Annie praised Arya for her foresight, not knowing that all of it was based on information Arya had analyzed from her previous life. And at that moment, Az's face suddenly appeared in her mind. Arya's face instantly turned red again. At dusk the next day, Arya rode in a carriage to see Sarah. Sarah had sent her a letter inviting Arya to meet with her and the Marquis. When Arya pushed open the door, it was the Marquis who welcomed her. Sarah also rushed out, both surprised and delighted to see Arya, and then the three of them went inside together for a meal. Arya expressed her thanks for their invitation, while the Marquis felt that all of this was only natural. Sarah spoke about the happy times she had spent with Arya, and a joyful smile appeared on her face. She felt truly happy to have met a kindred spirit. Arya was somewhat surprised. Although she had been constantly numbing herself and telling herself that in this life she had come only for revenge, and that Sarah was merely someone she was using, the happiness before her was something she could not ignore, and in her heart Arya sincerely wished Sarah well. Arya's birthday was coming soon, but she did not want to make a big event of it, because after that would be her younger sister Miel's birthday, and that day the Crown Princess would also come, so everyone would be busy attending to her arrival. Before that, there was no need for her to draw too much attention to herself because of a birthday banquet. And so Arya's birthday passed quietly, aside from the bouquet of tulips sent anonymously. Miel's birthday soon arrived, and there were many people coming and going. Arya sat off to the side, coldly watching those nobles who looked glamorous on the surface. They attacked her background with the most vicious words. Oscar and Miel entered the banquet together with the Crown Princess's mother. At once, everyone began talking among themselves. Standing before the crowd, the Crown Princess said that after Miss Miel came of age, she would marry our Oscar. Arya watched as Oscar personally placed the engagement ring on Miel's finger. Although she had approached Oscar from the start only to drive a wedge between him and Miel, and now she had merely become a discarded card. If Oscar had ever firmly chosen her, then Arya's heart could no longer endure it, and she suddenly turned and ran out. Arya ran to the window. What kind of feelings did she really have for Oscar? Was she angry because she had lost a useful card? In this world, were there some things that could not be obtained, no matter how hard one tried? A sense of loss and invisible walls surrounded Arya tightly. When Arya walked to the door of her bedroom, she found a gift box placed there. Inside it was the brooch she had given Oscar, and Arya's anger instantly surged to its peak. That bastard, when he himself had done nothing. He got engaged to Miel on one hand, and on the other returned this brooch to imply old feelings. Even now, was I still supposed to understand him? Arya suddenly raised her hand, wanting to smash the brooch hard onto the ground. But then she saw the bouquet of bright and gentle tulips. Arya froze. Why should she be angry over someone like that? The current her was already different from before. In this life, she had assets, faith, and strength. Why should she deny her own efforts? There was still some time before she would show Miel her true power. If she did nothing, then only death would be waiting for her. She would absolutely never give up on life so easily as she had in her previous life. At the dining table, everyone was discussing Miel's wedding date. Arya pinned the red rose brooch to her chest and deliberately showed it to Miel. She even said that this brooch was received at her door on the day of the engagement, and that it was as beautiful as the pattern of the Duke's family. Miel instantly understood the reason, and was so furious, she nearly went mad. Arya curled her lips into a slight smile. With disdain, she tossed the brooch aside. Because of Arya's brooch, Miel felt extremely upset. She planned to write to the Crown Princess, but was stopped by her maid. Previously, Miel had already written a long letter asking the crown princess to announce the wedding date. But now the crown princess was busy dealing with internal strife among the noble faction, and the urgent matter was to find another way out. The maid suggested that it would be better to win over the newly rising commoner capitalists. So Miel began hosting tea parties one after another, and the invited guests turned out to be all commoner wives. Arya sensed that something was wrong and decided to go investigate in person. Feigning ease, Arya interrupted Miel's tea party and asked whether she could join them. Miel's face stiffened at once, and she was just about to refuse. But those commoner wives did not know how to read the room and instead were very curious about the infamous villainous Arya. Arya smoothly entered the tea party, but unexpectedly discovered that the families behind these invited ladies were all ones she had recently invested in. It seemed Miel also wanted to win them over. The ladies spoke of that investor's cleverness, saying that person had given them tremendous help. Arya gave an awkward smile. Hearing others praise her like this really did make her a little embarrassed. Using the topic of perfume, Arya inquired about Mrs. Bost's work while also complimenting the lady's taste. This won an immediate chorus of agreement, while Miel looked quite surprised. These wives were actually working, so Miel hinted that they ought to hire long-term workers. Arya, however, gave a cold laugh and objected, saying that if wives shared their husbands' burdens, there was no need for them to be overly criticized. What was wrong with that? Seeing that the two were about to argue, the wives quickly stepped in to smooth things over. Although in their hearts they agreed more with Arya's words, on the surface, they still went along with Miel, and they said that in the future they would definitely hire long-term workers. But Miel's dissatisfaction with Arya had already reached its limit. She had no intention of stopping there, and continued by saying that dealing with filthy money was not the proper style for a lady. That one sentence offended both the wives and Arya. To ease the atmosphere, Miel brought out gifts, which were rose-shaped brooches. But Arya sneered inwardly, because the rose brooch was clearly a token of the Duke's family. Yet her dear younger sister Miel, before even marrying into that family, was already thinking of flaunting her power. The commoner wives felt that the gifts were too expensive and all declined them, unwilling to accept them. Miel then proposed that next time she could host the tea party again and conveniently introduce the wives to some of her own friends. But the wives hurriedly refused, saying that the Duke's family was truly far above their station. Miel left in a huff. Seizing the moment, Arya proposed that she host a tea party instead, but the wives seemed somewhat hesitant. Arya felt a little disappointed, but unexpectedly, the wives suddenly invited Arya to attend one of their own gatherings. That day, Len presented Bost's invitation to as if offering a treasure, as was also very interested in this newly rising capitalist and the investor behind them, and decided to investigate personally. As the conflict with the noble faction became more and more intense, those hateful lackeys actually became dissatisfied with the crown prince's continued suppression and submitted a memorial asking that the crown prince be sent to the frontier. Even as father hurriedly summoned him back, but as merely smiled faintly, clearly having no intention of letting them off. Starting from the meeting about the casino, as no longer hid his methods, these vile vermin that had bred in the shadows ought to be cleared away one by one, slowly. Len praised him, saying that Miss Arya really was clever, and that her original proposal to hand the casino over to the nobles had been extremely wise. As also thought of that golden-haired girl, and his face gradually turned red. He then joined Len in praising her. It had to be said that the power of love truly was great. It could always make people become sincere and frank. Len suggested using as teleportation ability to go see Miss Arya, but as refused. Although he missed Arya very much, teleportation consumed too much stamina. But precisely because of this longing, work became more motivating. I only hope we can meet again soon. Beautiful Miss Arya. As began seriously setting his work in motion, deciding to agree to a price reduction on luxury goods and sending a letter to the neutral faction. But this was not bowing his head to the noble faction. Rather, it was a strategic retreat, because a sudden price cut would disrupt market order. After reading the letter, the neutral faction could not help sighing that the crown prince's future was uncertain. Far away in the capital, Arya also heard about the crown prince's recent style of conduct. Many nobles had gone bankrupt, and even the casino had been thoroughly investigated. Arya imagined what kind of impact the nobles' bankruptcy would have on the Rost family. When she imagined herself reduced to wandering the streets, her face unexpectedly flushed a little. That scene really was wonderful. Coming back to her senses, Arya looked at the maid Barry kneeling before her, and her gaze gradually darkened. "You're moving this slowly? I'm afraid I'll have to wait until next year before I can drink the tea you make." Barry trembled from the questioning, while Arya smashed the porcelain cup onto the floor. Smiling, she ordered Barry to hurry and clean this place up. When a maid came to announce that the meal was served, Arya remembered how in her previous life she had been completely toyed with by this servant. Once again, she sighed at how innocently naive her former self had been. She stared as Barry drank all the brewed tea, and Barry's face looked terrible for a moment, while Arya found the sight extremely pleasing. "I really don't know whether to call you lucky or unlucky. My first target of revenge, Dear little Barry. At the Rost family's dining table, everyone was enthusiastically discussing the neutral faction's actions. Because of this matter, however, Arya began to speculate about as true identity. Could he be the Emperor's illegitimate son? Baron Rost asked Arya what she thought of the neutral faction, but Arya had no intention of helping him and merely put on an ignorant and innocent act. Instead, she was sarcastically mocked by her younger sister Miel. Soon, the gathering of the newly risen capitalists arrived, and Arya was invited to attend. At the same time, Az also attended the gathering under the identity of Pinoru, and so the two of them met there. Arya had not expected that Az's true identity would actually be Pinoru. But where exactly did you get so much money? Arya glared at Az, who would have thought that Az would actually avert his eyes. He instantly left Arya both speechless and angry. Az was somewhat embarrassed as well, but the two still secretly kept looking at each other. Watching the changes that had happened to each other recently, Arya introduced herself to everyone with composure, and her unique insights at the last tea party also won unanimous praise from everyone. But when Az saw Arya looking toward another man, the jealousy in his heart immediately overturned like a spilled jar of vinegar. Then Az smiled faintly and, as this time's new investor, began introducing his investment project. It was actually a school, and the most special thing about this school was that everyone, including commoners, could enroll. Arya was slightly stunned. Although it looked like an investment, Az actions were actually creating opportunities for commoners. Could it be because of me that he saw hope? Arya was secretly delighted inside, but Az interrupted her. No. It's because the Empire needs talent. Arya's expression immediately turned somewhat awkward, so it was just her being self-indulgent. After the meeting ended, Arya had no intention of paying attention to Az, but Az came running over on his own like a big dog to greet her. As they walked along the road, Arya never could have imagined that she would learn in such a setting that Az was young Master Pinoru, but Az denied that identity, leaving Arya puzzled. He had hidden himself again and again. Could he really be an illegitimate child? Then Az brought Arya into the forest and said that this place was right next to the capital. Arya's anger immediately flared up. You're still lying to me. This road is so far. How could we possibly have arrived after walking only this little while? The man before her clearly liked her. It would have been one thing if he was just reluctant to say it, but he kept lying to her too. He really was infuriating. Arya's eyes gradually darkened as well. Az brought her into a wooden cabin and began seriously explaining to Arya his family's special ability, namely teleportation. Because Arya possessed the Hourglass of time, she quickly understood. Then Az said that Pinoru was only an alias, and that his real identity was as Telope, the Crown Prince. What? The Crown Prince? Arya instantly froze, and a wave of dizziness hit her as she became both embarrassed and angry. Az looked at Arya somewhat helplessly, hoping that she could still treat him the same as before. But for Arya, this was obviously a little difficult, since the person standing before her was the Crown Prince, and before this, she had been so rude to him. Az immediately comforted Arya, saying that he did not mind any of those things she had done at all. On the contrary, he felt that Arya was charming in every way, and Arya immediately became even more shy. Az looked at her and thought that she was like a puffed-up little cat, so adorable, he could hardly bear it. Because of urgent business, Az could only place a kiss on the back of Arya's hand and say that he would write to her in the future. When Arya returned home, she gently touched the back of her hand, feeling both sweet and somewhat dazed inside. Not long afterward, Az's project proposal was delivered. Naturally, Arya would not miss the chance to establish a connection with the royal family. She quickly signed the project proposal, but then began worrying about how she should tell Az that she herself was the investor. At a warm and cheerful family dinner at the Rost household, her mother brought up Sarah's engagement to the Marquis and then took the opportunity to boast that her daughter had a very good relationship with Sarah. When Miel heard this, she was quite surprised. Her father, Baron Rost, also hurriedly began currying favor with Arya, but Arya did not even spare him a glance. Instead, she felt disgusted by her father's fawning manner. At that moment, Arya received a letter from Az. Although it contained only a few simple words of greeting, her mood mysteriously improved, perhaps because that was the power of love. Soon, Sarah's engagement banquet also arrived as scheduled. Arya deliberately wore matching best friend-style dresses with Sarah and carefully dressed herself up. Her beauty left even Miel staring blankly. Arya gave Sarah the gift she had carefully prepared. The two had not seen each other for a long time, and they were both very happy when they embraced. But Miel rudely interrupted them at the wrong moment. She even took the initiative to introduce herself to Sarah, while conveniently mocking Arya as well. Hearing her good friend spoken of like that, Sarah's gaze was almost sharp enough to kill on the spot, and she could not help secretly worrying about Arya's situation. The Marquis noticed something unusual about his wife and quickly stepped forward to comfort her. Sarah looked at him shyly, and in her heart, she could not help hoping that Arya, like herself, would meet a truly good man. Standing at the center of the banquet beside her father, Arya became a young lady surrounded by admiration like the moon among stars. But Arya was not truly happy inside. Instead, She felt as if a lifetime had passed, listening to everyone's praise, longing and rejection intertwined into contradiction, filling her body little by little. The sudden appearance of As interrupted Arya's thoughts. Arya immediately chased after him. The night was deeply dark, but Arya could not find any trace of As. Just as she was feeling disappointed, a warm coat was draped over her shoulders. Arya looked at the clothing As had placed over her and instantly blushed. In the courtyard, the two spoke softly, exchanging words of love that belonged only to each other. Arya hoped that As could look at her openly and directly, but As had come this time to win over the Marquis, and yet he could not suppress his longing for Arya no matter what. In order to avoid running directly into the noble faction, he could only watch Arya from afar. Moonlight fell across Arya's golden long hair. In that instant, As was momentarily entranced. He even felt that Arya was like an illusory flower reflected in water, or the moon in a mirror, as if she might disappear the very next second. As placed a kiss on Arya's forehead. Thus ended their brief meeting. Just then, a sharp and vicious shout suddenly rang out. It turned out that the crown princess, who had been hiding in the shadows and watching, had discovered the intimate behavior between the two. She furiously scolded Arya and As for behaving improperly, but As had absolutely no interest in this nominal fiancé, and what was more, he had never intended from the bottom of his heart to marry her. So he mocked her mercilessly, even saying that he would rather remain single for his entire life than marry the crown princess. These words infuriated the crown princess greatly, but As merely smiled faintly. He even took the opportunity to imply a threat to her with the casino account books. After the gathering ended, the crown princess returned home and became angrier the more she thought about it. Naturally, she could do nothing to the crown prince himself. Then Arya, that little slut who seduced people everywhere, had to be removed. Just as the crown princess was at her wit's end, Miel came to visit her and conveniently proposed that they deal with Arya together. Miel had long since been unable to wait any longer, and besides, she had never stopped making things difficult for Arya at home. Now that she had the crown princess's support, all those vicious thoughts of hers came pouring out at once. Meanwhile, Arya was sitting on the sofa. Seeing that Barry's behavior seemed suspicious, just then Annie happily ran in. She was holding a letter from Pinoru.